A young woman flees her abusive ex through the rain-soaked streets of Manhattan, but the car crash isn't the worst thing that happens to her. When Lena Cross wakes up in crime boss Roman DeLuca's mansion, she discovers the man she was running from had planned to sell her like a debt payment. Now, caught in the middle of a bloody gang war, she must choose. Trust the most dangerous man in the city, or become a pawn in a game that will destroy her. Like, comment with your city, so I can see how far this story travels, and follow to the end to see how a terrified woman becomes a queen. The rain hit the pavement like bullets, turning Manhattan's streets into black mirrors that reflected nothing but Lena Cross's terror. Her sneakers slapped against the wet concrete, each step sending water splashing up her jeans as she ran. Behind her, Brandon's voice cut through the storm, closer than it should have been, closer than it had any right to be. "Lena, stop running, baby. We just need to talk." The word baby made her stomach turn. 3 months ago, that word had meant something different. 3 months ago, she'd believed the flowers after the first time he shoved her were genuine apologies. 2 months ago, she'd convinced herself the bruises on her ribs were her fault for pushing his buttons. 1 month ago, she'd finally understood that Brandon Vale didn't know how to love anything he couldn't control. Tonight, she'd found the messages on his phone. Messages about a debt. Messages about a payment. Messages that used her name like she was property. Her lungs burned. The physical therapy degree she'd worked 4 years for hadn't prepared her for this, for running like prey through streets that suddenly felt like a maze designed to trap her. She'd grown up in Queens, knew Manhattan well enough, but panic had a way of making familiar streets feel alien and hostile. A traffic light ahead glowed red through the downpour. Lena didn't slow down. Couldn't. Brandon's footsteps were thunder behind her, and she knew what happened to women who stopped running in stories like this. They became statistics. They became warnings other women whispered about. She burst into the intersection without looking. The SUV's headlights hit her vision like a flashbang, massive, black, moving fast. Her brain had exactly enough time to register the chrome grille before her body made contact with metal and glass, and the world spun into chaos. The impact threw her across the hood, her shoulder slamming against the windshield hard enough to spiderweb the glass. She rolled, tumbled, and hit the asphalt with a crack that might have been her ribs, or might have been the pavement, or might have been both. The rain kept falling. Somewhere in the distance, Brandon was shouting. Closer, much closer. A car door opened with the heavy thunk of expensive engineering. Lena tried to move. Her body sent back error messages from every nerve, pain radiating from her shoulder and hip, and somewhere deep in her chest that made breathing feel like swallowing broken glass. Through the rain and the shock, she saw shoes. Men's dress shoes, gleaming despite the wet, stopping inches from her face. "Call Marco. Tell him we have a situation." The voice was calm. Too calm for someone who'd just hit a woman with their vehicle. Deep, with an accent that suggested old money and older threats. "And find out who's making all that noise." "Boss?" The guy behind her. "I don't care if it's the mayor. Find out what he wants and make him quiet." Hands lifted her with surprising gentleness. Professional hands. The kind that knew how to move injured bodies without causing more damage. Lena's vision swam as she was carried toward the SUV, rain streaming down her face. She tried to speak, managed only a wheeze that tasted like blood. "Don't try to talk." The calm voice again, closer now. "Your ribs are probably cracked, maybe broken. You ran a red light straight into a $50,000 vehicle, which makes you either suicidal or desperate. I'm betting desperate." The SUV's interior smelled like leather and gunpowder. Real leather. The kind Lena had only encountered in showrooms she couldn't afford to shop in. She was placed across the back seat with the same careful efficiency, and finally, through the haze of shock, she got a clear look at the man whose car she'd destroyed. Roman DeLuca was younger than she expected, maybe 30, with dark hair slicked back from a face that belonged on classical statues, all sharp angles and hard lines that suggested both beauty and brutality. His suit probably cost more than her entire year's rent, but it was his eyes that froze something in Lena's chest. Dark, calculating, completely devoid of the panic most people would feel after hitting someone with their car. He studied her the way a jeweler might study a stone, assessing value and flaws with the same detached precision. What's your name? Lena's mouth tasted like copper. Lena. Lena Cross. And the man chasing you? My ex, Brandon. She coughed, and the pain in her ribs spiked sharp enough to make her vision white out for a second. Please, I need to go. You need to stay still before you puncture a lung. Roman glanced toward the front of the SUV. Marco, what did you learn? A voice from the driver's seat, thick with a Brooklyn accent. Guy's Brandon Vale, boss. Runs with the West Side crew, small-time dealer, mostly coke, some pills. Says the girl stole from him. I didn't steal anything. The words came out too loud, too desperate. Lena tried to sit up and immediately regretted it. I didn't. Roman's hand on her shoulder was gentle but absolute. I said stay still. Marco, is he still out there? Yeah, making a scene, wants us to hand her over. Something flickered across Roman's face, too quick to read. Tell Mr. Vale we'll discuss the matter privately. Bring him to the car. Boss? Oh, now. The authority in that single word made Lena's skin prickle. This wasn't a man used to being questioned. The driver's door opened and closed. Through the tinted window, Lena watched a massive silhouette approach Brandon, who was still shouting, gesturing wildly toward the SUV. The conversation lasted less than a minute. When the back door on the opposite side opened, Brandon practically fell into the car, rain-soaked and wild-eyed. He didn't even look at Lena. His attention locked onto Roman with the intensity of a cornered animal recognizing a bigger predator. Mr. DeLuca. Brandon's voice had lost all its earlier aggression. I didn't know it was your car, man. I swear. I didn't know. She just ran out. I was trying to stop her. She's got something of mine. Does she? Roman's tone was flat, uninterested. What did she steal, Mr. Vale? Product. From my stash, worth about $5,000, maybe more. Lena's head spun. That's a lie. I never touched your drugs, Brandon. I never even knew where you kept. Shut up! Brandon finally looked at her, and the hatred in his eyes was pure enough to taste. You think you can just leave? Think you can just walk out after everything I did for you? I put a roof over your head, I fed you, and this is how you repay me? The lies were so absurd they almost made Lena laugh. Except laughing would hurt too much. She'd had her own apartment, her own job. Brandon had moved himself in like a colonizing force, gradually taking over her space, her money, her life. Roman held up one hand, silencing them both. Mr. Vale, you seem to be under the impression that I care about your domestic disputes. I don't. What I do care about is that this young woman ran into traffic to escape you, suggesting she had reason to be afraid. What I also care about is that you're lying to me about what she allegedly stole. I'm not. You are. Your tales are pathetic. The question is why? Roman's gaze didn't waver from Brandon's face. So I'll ask once more, and I suggest you consider your answer very carefully. What is she actually worth to you? The silence that followed was thick enough to choke on. Lena watched Brandon's face cycle through expressions: fear, calculation, resignation. When he spoke again, his voice had dropped to something quiet and defeated. I owe money. To Victor Soren's people. 30,000. I don't have it. Roman's expression didn't change. Go on. They said they'd take payment another way. That Victor was looking for someone clean, no criminal record, some medical training. They showed me pictures of what happens to people who don't pay. Brandon's hands were shaking. I didn't know what else to do. The words landed in Lena's brain like stones, each one sinking slowly as she processed the meaning. Medical training, payment. Victor Soren. She'd heard that name before, whispered in the same tones people used for natural disasters and terminal diagnoses. You were going to give her to Victor Soren. Roman said it like he was confirming the weather, to settle a $30,000 debt. I didn't have a choice. Everyone has choices, Mr. Vale. You simply made profoundly stupid ones. Roman pulled out his phone, typed something with his thumbs. Victor Soren is currently engaged in what you might call aggressive expansion. He's been taking territory, absorbing smaller operations, eliminating competition. I imagine he wanted someone with medical knowledge to patch up his men without involving hospitals. Someone disposable enough that her disappearance wouldn't cause problems. Someone exactly like Ms. Cross here. Lena's chest felt tight, and it had nothing to do with her cracked ribs. He was going to sell me. Yes, to a man who, what, keeps a personal trauma surgeon in his basement? Something like that. Roman's attention shifted to her, and Lena had the uncomfortable feeling of being dissected by that stare. Though I doubt your physical therapy degree would have helped you much once Victor realized you couldn't perform surgery. Men like Victor Soren don't handle disappointment well. Brandon made a sound like a wounded dog. I didn't want to do it. You gotta believe me, Lena. I didn't want to, but they were going to kill me. Shut up! Lena's voice came out harder than she'd ever heard it. Just shut up, Brandon. Roman typed another message, then pocketed his phone. Mr. Vale, here's what's going to happen. You're going to leave this vehicle and walk away. You're going to tell Victor Soren's people that the deal is off, that the girl got away. You're going to figure out how to handle your debt on your own. And you're never going to contact Ms. Cross again. Are we clear? But the money is your problem, not mine. Roman's tone could have frozen nitrogen. Leave, now. Brandon looked at Lena one more time, something pleading in his eyes that she might have responded to 3 months ago. Now it just looked pathetic. He stumbled out of the SUV into the rain, and the door closed behind him with the finality of a coffin lid. Lena waited until his footsteps had faded before speaking. Why did you let him go? Because killing him in the middle of Park Avenue would be inconvenient. Roman adjusted his cufflinks, a gesture so casual it was almost insulting. Marco, take us home. Call Dr. Chen. Tell him we have a patient. The SUV pulled smoothly into traffic. Lena watched the city slide past through tinted windows, her mind still trying to process the last 10 minutes. She'd run from Brandon into the path of a man whose name she now recognized from news reports that used words like alleged and organized crime and under investigation. I should go to a hospital. You should, but you won't. Roman didn't look at her, his attention on his phone. Victor Soren has people in most of the emergency rooms in Manhattan. The moment your information goes into the system, he'll know where you are. And since Brandon was supposed to deliver you tonight, Victor will be very interested in why that didn't happen. So what, you're kidnapping me? I'm preventing you from being kidnapped by someone significantly worse than me. Roman glanced up. Consider it protective custody. I didn't ask for your protection. No, you asked for it when you ran into traffic to escape a man who planned to sell you like livestock. Roman's voice stayed level, but something sharp moved behind his eyes. Whether you realize it or not, Lena Cross, you just became a problem that Victor Soren will want to solve. And I can't have one of his problems bleeding all over my upholstery. Lena wanted to argue, but the pain in her ribs was getting worse, spreading through her chest like cracks in ice. The adrenaline that had kept her running was draining away, leaving exhaustion heavy enough to drown in. Where are you taking me? Somewhere safe, somewhere Victor's people can't reach you. Roman finally put his phone down, giving her his full attention. You can leave whenever you want, Ms. Cross. I'm not your captor, but I'd suggest waiting until you can breathe without looking like you're about to pass out, and until we figure out how to keep you alive long enough to actually leave. The SUV climbed through neighborhoods that got progressively quieter, more exclusive. Buildings gave way to brownstones, then to actual houses with actual yards, a rarity in Manhattan that spoke to obscene wealth. They pulled through gates that opened automatically, up a driveway lined with trees that somehow looked manicured even in the rain. The house, no, the mansion, rose out of the darkness like something from a different century, stone and iron and windows that glowed with warm light. Men in dark suits materialized from the shadows, opening the SUV doors, moving with the coordinated precision of military units. Lena was lifted out of the car by the same careful hands that had placed her there. Roman walked beside her as they carried her up marble steps, through doors that probably weighed more than her entire apartment's furniture combined, into a foyer that belonged in a museum. Guest room, second floor. Dr. Chen should be here within the hour. Roman's instructions were crisp, efficient. To Lena, he said, Someone will bring you clean clothes. Don't try to move around too much. Wait. Lena's voice stopped him halfway to what looked like a study. Why are you doing this? Roman turned back, and for the first time, something almost human crossed his face. Not kindness, exactly. something more complicated. Because Victor Soren and I have what you might call a complicated relationship. He takes things that belong to me, I take things that belong to him. It's become almost a game. Roman's smile had no warmth in it. And you, Lena Cross, just became the most interesting piece on the board. He left her then, disappearing into the depths of his mansion while men carried her up a staircase wide enough to drive a car up. The guest room they brought her to was bigger than her entire apartment, decorated in shades of cream and gold that probably had fancy names like champagne and antique brass. They set her on a bed that felt like sleeping on a cloud made of money. Someone brought towels, someone else brought clothes, soft cotton that smelled like expensive detergent. A third person, a woman with kind eyes and careful hands, helped Lena change without jarring her ribs too badly, asking gentle questions about where it hurt, how bad the pain was, whether she felt dizzy or nauseous. Lena answered automatically, her physical therapy training kicking in even through the shock. Probable rib fractures, possible concussion, definite contusions across her right shoulder and hip. She'd need x-rays to be sure, but nothing felt life-threatening, just life-changing. The doctor arrived exactly when Roman said he would. An older Asian man with surgeon's hands and a bedside manner that suggested he'd seen worse things than car accident victims in crime boss mansions. He confirmed Lena's self-diagnosis, taped her ribs, gave her painkillers that she was too tired to refuse, and told her to rest. Mr. DeLuca said to tell you he'll answer your questions in the morning, Dr. Chen said as he packed his bag. For now, just sleep. You're safe here. Lena wanted to laugh at that. Safe. In the house of a man whose name was synonymous with organized crime. Safe from Victor Soren, but surrounded by armed guards, and the kind of wealth that came from activities people didn't put on tax returns. But the painkillers were dragging her down into darkness, and her body was making executive decisions her mind couldn't override. The bed was too comfortable, the room was too warm, the exhaustion was too complete. Her last conscious thought was of Brandon's face when Roman asked him what she was worth. $30,000. That's what her life had been valued at. $30,000, and whatever use Victor Soren could squeeze out of her medical knowledge before disposing of her. Sleep took her before the anger could fully form, but she felt it there, building like pressure behind a dam. When she woke up, she would have questions. When she woke up, she would demand answers. When she woke up, Lena Cross would start learning the rules of the world she'd crashed into. And Roman DeLuca would learn that the woman he'd saved wasn't nearly as helpless as she'd seemed on that rain-soaked street. Lena woke to sunlight streaming through windows she didn't recognize, in a bed that cost more than her car, wearing clothes that weren't hers. The disorientation lasted exactly 3 seconds before memory crashed back. The rain, the running, the impact, Brandon's confession, Roman's impossible calm. Her ribs announced their presence with a sharp spike of pain when she tried to sit up. The tape Dr. Chen had applied held things together, but breathing still felt like her chest was wrapped in barbed wire. She moved slowly, testing her range of motion, cataloging damage with the clinical detachment her training had taught her. Fractured ribs, definitely. The bruising on her shoulder had bloomed overnight into a spectacular purple-black mess. Her hip ached when she put weight on it, but nothing felt broken there. She'd been lucky. Incredibly, impossibly lucky. Or unlucky, depending on perspective. The room looked even more expensive in daylight. The kind of expensive that came with original artwork on the walls and furniture that had probably been handcrafted by people with waiting lists. French doors led to a balcony overlooking grounds that looked like something from English countryside estates, somehow transplanted into Manhattan through sheer force of wealth. Lena limped to the window and looked out at manicured gardens, a fountain that probably cost more than her student loans. And she counted quickly at least 6 men in suits positioned at various points around the property, not gardeners. Guards! A knock at the door made her turn too fast. Pain flared. Come in! The woman from last night entered, carrying a tray that smelled like real coffee and fresh bread. She was maybe 50, with gray-streaked dark hair and the kind of face that suggested she'd raised multiple children and wouldn't tolerate nonsense from any of them. Mr. DeLuca thought you might be hungry. I'm Maria, the housekeeper. How are you feeling? Lena's stomach answered before she could, growling at the smell of food. Like I got hit by a car. Maria's mouth twitched. Well, technically, you ran into the car, but yes, sit, eat. Dr. Chen left instructions that you should have protein and plenty of fluids. The tray held scrambled eggs, toast, fresh fruit, orange juice, and coffee that tasted like it cost more per cup than Lena used to spend on groceries for a week. She ate mechanically, her mind churning. How long am I supposed to stay here? As long as you need to heal. Maria began opening curtains, letting in more light. Mr. DeLuca was very clear. You're a guest, not a prisoner. But he did mention that leaving right now would be, inadvisable. Because of Victor Sorin. Maria's hands paused on the curtain. You know that name? I learned it last night, right before I learned my ex-boyfriend was planning to sell me to him. Lena heard the bitterness in her own voice and didn't try to hide it. What else should I know about the man whose house I'm apparently living in now? Maria turned, and her expression had shifted into something more careful. That's really a conversation for Mr. DeLuca. Is he here? He's in his office. He said to let him know when you woke up. Maria hesitated. Miss Cross, I've worked for the DeLuca family for 20 years. Roman's father, his grandfather before that. So I'll tell you something I probably shouldn't. Roman is many things, not all of them good, but he keeps his word. If he said you're safe here, you're safe. If he said you're not a prisoner, you're not. Whatever else you may think of him, believe that. Lena wanted to argue, but something in Maria's tone suggested the older woman had seen enough to know the difference between a man's lies and his truth. I'd like to talk to him. I'll let him know. There are clothes in the closet that should fit you. Take your time. After Maria left, Lena investigated the closet and found it stocked with women's clothing in her size. Everything still tagged, nothing worn. Someone had gone shopping overnight. Or Roman kept a wardrobe of guest clothes for women who crashed into his car and needed protection from rival crime lords. The absurdity of the situation threatened to overwhelm her. Yesterday morning, her biggest problem had been whether to report Brandon to the police or just change her locks. Yesterday afternoon, she'd been planning to move to her friend Sarah's couch until she found a new apartment. Yesterday evening, she'd discovered the man she'd been trying to leave had been planning to sell her. Today, she was standing in a mansion owned by a mob boss wearing designer clothes that had appeared like magic, guarded by armed men from a threat she barely understood. Lena chose jeans and a soft sweater, dressed slowly to avoid jarring her ribs, and emerged from the room to find a young man in a suit waiting in the hallway. Miss Cross? I'm Tony. Mr. DeLuca asked me to bring you to his office when you were ready. Tony led her through the mansion, which looked even more impressive in daylight. High ceilings, crown molding, art that might actually be original pieces worth 6 figures. Everything spoke of old money, old power, generations of wealth built on foundations Lena probably didn't want to examine too closely. Roman's office was on the first floor, behind double doors that Tony opened with a deferential knock. The room beyond looked like it belonged to a Fortune 500 CEO. Massive desk, floor-to-ceiling bookshelves, windows overlooking the gardens, and enough technology to run a small country. Roman sat behind the desk, reading something on his laptop. He'd changed from last night's suit into dark slacks and a white shirt with the sleeves rolled up, somehow managing to look both casual and dangerous. He glanced up when Lena entered, his dark eyes assessing her with the same clinical precision as before. You're moving better than I expected. Dr. Chen's good at his job. Where's Brandon? Lena didn't sit, didn't move further into the room. Is he alive? For now. Roman closed the laptop. He went to Victor's people this morning and told them you died in the accident. Caused quite a scene, apparently. Crying. The whole performance. Victor's lieutenant seemed to believe him. For now. For now, Roman agreed. Victor Sorin is thorough. Eventually, he'll want proof. When he doesn't get it, he'll start asking questions. Which means Brandon's life expectancy is probably measured in days, not weeks. Lena thought she should feel something about that. Guilt, maybe, or horror. Instead, she just felt numb. You could warn him. I could. I won't. Roman stood, moved to a sideboard where crystal decanters held amber liquid. He poured 2 glasses, brought one to Lena. It's 10 in the morning, but you look like you could use it. She took the glass but didn't drink. Why won't you warn him? Because Brandon Vale made his choices, and those choices led him to try selling you to a man who would have used you until you broke, then disposed of you like trash. Roman sipped his drink, completely unbothered. I have many flaws, Lena, but I don't protect men who treat women like commodities. But you'll let him die. I'll let him face the consequences of his actions. There's a difference. Roman moved back to his desk, leaned against it. You're angry. That's good. Anger is useful. Fear makes you run, but anger makes you think. I'm not angry, Lena stopped because the lie tasted wrong. Fine, I'm furious. Brandon was going to sell me. Actually sell me, like I was a used car or a piece of furniture. And I didn't even know until I saw the messages. How long had he been planning it? How long was I sleeping next to someone who'd already decided I was worth $30,000 and whatever Victor Sorin wanted to do with me? Probably since the moment he realized he couldn't pay his debt. Roman's voice stayed level, matter of fact. Men like Brandon don't see people. They see assets, ways to solve problems. You were convenient. You had the medical background Victor wanted, and Brandon convinced himself that using you was somehow less bad than facing his own consequences. Lena finally drank from the glass. Whiskey, smooth and expensive, burning down her throat. You seem very calm about all this. I've seen worse things done for less money. Roman set his own glass down. Now let me explain your situation, because you need to understand what you've walked into. Victor Sorin is trying to consolidate power in Manhattan's underground. He's been systematically eliminating competition, absorbing smaller operations, buying loyalty where he can, and creating fear where he can't. My family has held certain territories for 3 generations, which makes us an obstacle to his expansion. Your family. Lena heard herself say it like it was a foreign language. You mean the DeLuca crime family? I mean the DeLucas, yes, though we prefer to think of ourselves as businessmen with diverse interests. Roman's smile was sharp. Victor and I have been playing a careful game for the past year. He takes one of my distribution points, I take one of his warehouses. He turns one of my people, I feed false information through his network, back and forth, like chess with guns and money. And I'm what? A pawn? You were supposed to be Victor's pawn, an asset he could use, someone disposable with useful skills. But now you're in my house, under my protection, which changes the equation entirely. Roman's eyes stayed locked on hers. Victor will find out you're alive. When he does, he'll assume I took you deliberately, which means he'll retaliate. Which means keeping you safe has suddenly become complicated. Lena's ribs ached. The whiskey sat warm in her stomach. Why did you help me? Last night you could have let Brandon take me, could have driven away. Why didn't you? Roman was quiet for a long moment, and something shifted in his expression. Something that might have been memory. Because 3 years ago, I watched my sister die in a hospital after her husband put her there one too many times. The doctors did everything right, but she'd been bleeding internally for hours before she finally called for help. Too afraid. Too convinced she deserved it. His voice went quiet, hard. So when I see a woman running into traffic to escape a man who's chasing her, I remember Elena. And I remember that I didn't save her, but I can save someone else. The admission landed between them like something fragile and dangerous. Lena looked at Roman DeLuca, crime boss, killer, the kind of man her mother would have told her to run from, and saw something human underneath the expensive clothes and casual violence. I'm sorry about your sister. Don't be. Be smart instead. Roman straightened. You can't go back to your apartment. Victor's people will be watching it. You can't go to friends or family. That's the first place they'll look. You can't even use your phone without being tracked. For the foreseeable future, Lena Cross, your life as you knew it is over. The words should have terrified her. Instead, they crystallized something that had been building since she woke up. A strange, cold clarity. Then what do I do? You stay here. You heal. You learn how to protect yourself. Roman pulled a folder from his desk, slid it across to her. And you decide whether you want to survive or whether you want to fight back. Lena opened the folder. Inside were photographs of Brandon, time-stamped from this morning, walking into a building in Midtown. More photos of a man she didn't recognize, older, with silver hair and a face like a predator. Victor Soren, her brain supplied. The man who'd wanted to own her. Under the photos was a file. Her file. Medical records, school transcripts, employment history, even a credit report. Everything about Lena Cross laid out in black and white. Where did you get this? I have resources. Roman's tone suggested the answer should be obvious. Victor has the same file. He knew everything about you before Brandon ever made the offer. That's how he operates. Total information, total control. He would have known exactly how to break you, exactly what leverage to use to keep you compliant. Lena stared at her own face in the DMV photo, hating how young she looked, how naive. You said I could leave whenever I want. You can. But if I do, Victor will find me. Yes. And if I stay, then you're under my protection, which comes with its own complications. Roman moved around the desk, stood close enough that Lena had to look up to meet his eyes. I won't lie to you. Being associated with me makes you a target. But you're already a target, Lena. The only question is whether you want to be a target who's defended or a target who's alone. The choice shouldn't have been difficult. Lena had spent 23 years being smart, being safe, following rules and working toward a normal life. And where had it gotten her? Into Brandon's apartment? Into Brandon's trap? Into a situation where her own boyfriend had valued her at $30,000. If I stay, what happens? You learn, you train, you become someone Victor can't use even if he manages to take you. Roman's voice dropped. And you help me destroy him before he destroys everything I've built. It was insane. Completely insane. Lena should walk out right now, take her chances with the police, witness protection, anything but staying in a mob boss's mansion and agreeing to participate in a gang war. But the anger that had been building since last night crystallized into something harder, sharper. Brandon had tried to sell her. Victor Soren had wanted to own her. Both men had looked at Lena Cross and seen nothing but a tool to be used and discarded. What kind of training? Roman's smile was slow, dangerous, the kind that turns victims into survivors, and survivors into something much more interesting. The training started that afternoon, and Lena quickly learned that Roman DeLuca didn't believe in easing people into new realities. The man who met her in what Roman called the facility, a converted garage behind the mansion that looked more like a private gym crossed with a tactical training center, introduced himself as Dmitri. He was built like a refrigerator with a face, somewhere in his 40s, with scars that suggested he'd lived through situations most people only survived in movies. Roman says you need to learn how not to die. Dmitri's accent was thick, Russian or Ukrainian. Lena couldn't tell. This is good goal. We start simple. Simple turned out to be learning how to fall without breaking bones, how to move despite pain, how to recognize threats before they became fatal. Dmitri worked around her injured ribs with surprising care, adjusting exercises when she winced, but he never went easy on her. Pain is information, he said after Lena had landed on the mat for the 10th time, her hip screaming protest. Your body tells you what is damaged. You listen, you adapt, you keep moving. The moment you stop moving, you die. That's cheerful. I am not cheerful, man. Get up. By the time Dmitri called the session over, Lena's entire body felt like one giant bruise on top of the bruises she already had. She limped back to the main house, where Maria had somehow predicted her arrival and had a hot bath already drawn, with salts that smelled like eucalyptus, and something else Lena couldn't identify. The water stung every scrape and cut, but the heat worked into her muscles like magic. Lena sank deeper, letting the steam curl around her face, and tried to process the fact that her life had become something unrecognizable in less than 24 hours. She was still in the bath when she heard the commotion downstairs. Raised voices, one of them unmistakably Roman's, sharp with an authority that made the tiles vibrate. Lena dried off quickly, dressed in the clothes Maria had left, soft pants and a sweater that probably cost more than her old monthly rent, and followed the sound. The voices led her to a formal dining room where Roman stood at the head of a massive table, surrounded by men in expensive suits who all looked like they'd be more comfortable holding guns than forks. Maps and photographs covered the polished wood surface. Lena recognized some of the faces in the photos. Victor Soren, Brandon, and others she didn't know. Roman saw her in the doorway, and the entire room went quiet. "Gentlemen, this is Lena Cross, Lena, my associates." He gestured vaguely at the assembled men. "We're discussing business. You're welcome to listen if you want." It wasn't really an invitation, more like a test. Lena stepped into the room, acutely aware of every eye tracking her movement. She took a seat at the far end of the table, close enough to hear but far enough to not be in the way. One of the men, older with silver threading through dark hair, cleared his throat. "Roman, with respect, is this wise? The girl doesn't need to. The girl has a name, Sal, and she's the reason we're having this meeting." Roman's tone could have cut glass. "Victor thinks she's dead. That gives us maybe 48 hours before he figures out Brandon lied. We need to use that time." Another man, younger, with a scar bisecting his left eyebrow, leaned forward. "We hit his distribution network now, while he's distracted. Take out the warehouse on 10th Avenue, maybe the club in Chelsea." Too obvious. This from a thin man with wire-rimmed glasses who looked more like an accountant than a criminal. "Victor expects retaliation. He'll have those locations fortified. We need something he won't see coming." Roman's fingers drummed against the table, a rare tell that suggested he was thinking hard. "What about the money?" Glasses adjusted his frames. 3 shipments coming in this week. Cash from the casino operations, 2 drug payments, and a large wire transfer from the construction union Victor's been squeezing. Total, about $4 million. $4 million he can't afford to lose right now, not with the expansion he's planning. Roman looked at the maps, tracing routes with one finger. "Marco, what's the security situation?" Yes. The massive man from the SUV, Marco, pulled out his phone, scrolled through what looked like surveillance photos. Standard rotation. 6 guys at the main warehouse, 4 at the backup location. They moved the money in armored trucks, 2 guards inside, chase car following. Professional setup, but predictable. Predictable is exploitable. Roman glanced at Lena, and she realized he was gauging her reaction, testing whether she'd object, whether she'd run. "We take the shipment Thursday night. Clean, fast, no casualties if we can avoid it. Make it look like an outside crew, nothing connected to us." Sal shook his head. "Victor's going to know it was us." "Of course he will. But he can't prove it, which means he can't retaliate without looking weak to his own people." Roman's smile was cold calculation. "And 4 million missing from his war chest means he can't afford the expansion. Buys us time." The conversation continued, dissolving into logistics and details that flew over Lena's head. She listened anyway, filing away names and locations, trying to understand the chess game these men were playing with money and violence and territory. When the meeting finally broke up, the men filed out with nods to Roman and careful glances at Lena. Marco lingered by the door until everyone else had left, then approached Roman with a phone in his hand. "Boss, you need to see this." Roman took the phone, his expression darkening as he watched whatever video was playing. When he finally looked up, his jaw was tight. "When?" 2 hours ago. Our guy inside Victor's crew sent it." Roman handed the phone to Lena without explanation. The video showed a basement, concrete walls, harsh overhead lighting. Brandon was tied to a chair in the center of the frame, his face already swelling from recent impacts. Victor Soren stood behind him, impeccable in a gray suit, while 2 large men flanked the chair. The audio was poor, but Lena could make out Victor's voice, smooth and educated, asking questions about the accident, about Lena, about what exactly happened. Brandon was crying, swearing he'd told the truth, that she'd died on impact, that he'd seen her body. Victor didn't raise his voice, didn't need to. He simply nodded to one of the men, who produced a knife and went to work on Brandon's left hand with clinical precision. Lena's stomach turned. She shoved the phone back at Marco before the video could continue. "When did you know this would happen?" "The moment Brandon told Victor you were dead." Roman's voice was flat. "Victor doesn't trust easily. He was always going to verify. And you didn't warn him." "No." "Why are you showing me this?" Roman took the phone from Marco, dismissed him with a gesture, waited until they were alone before answering. Because you need to understand who Victor Soren is, what he's capable of. Brandon tried to sell you to that man, Lena. That's the fate he thought you deserved. So before you start feeling sympathy for the man screaming in that basement, remember that he would have delivered you there himself if given the chance. Lena's hands were shaking. She clasped them together, forced them still. I'm not feeling sympathy. I'm feeling... She stopped because she didn't have words for the mix of horror and satisfaction churning through her. This is insane. All of this. I should be calling the police, going into witness protection, doing literally anything except staying in a mob boss's mansion while he plans to steal $4 million from another mob boss. You should, Roman agreed, but you won't. How do you know? Because you're still here. Because you let Dmitri throw you on a mat for 2 hours instead of demanding to leave. Because you sat through that meeting and listened instead of running. Roman moved closer, and Lena caught the scent of his cologne, something dark and expensive. You're angry, Lena, furious, and you're smart enough to know that anger needs a target. I'm offering you one. He was right, and Lena hated that he was right. The old Lena, the one who'd existed 48 hours ago, would have been horrified by the video, by the casual discussion of theft and violence, by everything this world represented. But the old Lena had also tolerated Brandon's escalating abuse, had ignored red flags, had almost been sold like property. What happens when Victor figures out I'm alive? He comes for you, probably tries to take you to use as leverage against me, or maybe just to finish what Brandon started. Roman's eyes stayed locked on hers, which is why you need to be ready, why you need to learn how to fight, how to think like they think, how to survive in a world where people see you as a tool instead of a person. I don't want to be a tool. Then become a weapon. The words landed like a challenge, and Lena felt something shift inside her chest. Not quite acceptance, not yet, but the beginning of a decision that would change everything. How long do I have? To learn? Not long enough, but Dimitri's good at accelerated training and you're motivated. Roman checked his watch. There's something else you should know. We've been monitoring your apartment. 2 of Victor's people have been watching it since this morning. They're waiting to see if you show up. My things? Anything you need? We'll get you. Anything you can't replace? Tell Marco, and he'll arrange retrieval. But you can't go back there, Lena. Not ever. That part of your life is done. The finality of it felt like a door slamming shut. Her apartment, her job at the physical therapy clinic, her friends, her routine, all of it gone, erased by one decision to run from Brandon into traffic. Lena thought about her college roommate Sarah, who was probably texting her right now, wondering why she wasn't answering. Thought about her mom in Florida, who called every Sunday. Thought about the life she'd built slowly, carefully, only to watch it dissolve in less than 2 days. I need to tell people I'm okay. My mom, my friends, no. Roman's voice was sharp. Victor has resources, phone records, social media monitoring, the works. The moment you contact anyone from your old life, he'll know you're alive and he'll use them to find you. Your silence keeps them safe. So they just think I'm dead or missing. They think whatever the news tells them. There was a hit and run reported last night on Park Avenue. No fatalities, no serious injuries. As far as anyone knows, you're just not answering your phone. Roman's expression softened slightly. I know it's hard, but it's necessary. Lena wanted to argue, but the logic was inescapable. She'd seen what Victor did to Brandon just for lying. What would he do to her mother, or Sarah, if he thought they knew where Lena was hiding? How long do I have to stay invisible? Until Victor's no longer a threat. Roman's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, frowned. I need to take this. Maria will bring you dinner. Get some rest. Training continues tomorrow, and Dmitri doesn't believe in days off. He left her standing in the dining room, surrounded by maps of a city that suddenly felt like a war zone, dotted with markers representing territories and shipments and all the invisible lines that divided Roman's world from Victor's. Lena sank into one of the chairs, her ribs aching, her body exhausted, her mind racing. She should be terrified. She should be planning her escape, figuring out how to get to the police, how to get into protective custody, how to go back to being normal Lena Cross who worried about student loans and shift schedules. Instead, she found herself thinking about the video, about Brandon's screams, about the casual way Victor had ordered his torture. found herself remembering every time Brandon had shoved her, every bruise he'd excused, every time he'd made her feel small and worthless and deserving of his anger. $30,000. That's what she'd been worth to him. The anger that had been building since she woke up in Roman's mansion crystallized into something harder, colder, something that felt almost like clarity. She was still sitting there when Maria found her an hour later, bringing a tray of food that Lena barely tasted. The housekeeper didn't ask questions, just set out the dishes and poured wine that probably cost more than Lena used to make in a week. "You're thinking too hard," Maria said quietly. "I can always tell. That furrow between your eyebrows gets deeper." "How do you do it?" Lena looked up at the older woman. "Work here, I mean, knowing what Roman does, what all of this is." Maria was quiet for a moment, her hands stilling on the wine bottle. "My husband was a good man. Worked construction, union job, good benefits. Then the company started cutting corners, safety violations, bribes to inspectors. He fell 4 stories because a foreman was too cheap to replace worn harnesses. The company paid off the right people, and suddenly it was his fault. No compensation, no investigation, nothing." She poured herself a small glass, sat down across from Lena. "Roman's father heard about it. Don't ask me how, but he heard. And 3 months later, that company went bankrupt. The foreman disappeared, and I had enough money to raise my kids and send them to college. So you ask how I do it?" Maria's eyes were hard. "The world isn't fair, Miss Cross. The powerful hurt the weak, and the system protects the powerful. At least Roman's honest about it. At least with him, you know where you stand." "That doesn't make it right." "No, but it makes it real." Maria stood, collecting the empty plates. "You'll figure out soon enough that surviving in Roman's world means accepting what's real over what should be. Get some sleep. You look exhausted." After Maria left, Lena did try to sleep, but her mind wouldn't shut down. She kept seeing Brandon's face in the video, kept hearing Victor's calm voice ordering violence like he was ordering coffee, kept thinking about Roman's sister, Elena, who died because she'd been too afraid to ask for help. Somewhere around midnight, Lena gave up on sleep and wandered downstairs. The mansion was quieter at night, but never truly silent. She heard footsteps in distant hallways, low voices from behind closed doors, the kind of sounds that suggested this house never really slept. She found Roman in his study, still dressed despite the late hour, reading something on his laptop that made his expression dark. He looked up when she entered, unsurprised to see her. "Can't sleep?" "Every time I close my eyes, I see that video." Lena sat in one of the leather chairs across from his desk. "Does it bother you? What's happening to Brandon?" "Should it? I don't know. Shouldn't it bother someone?" Roman closed the laptop, gave her his full attention. "Brandon Vale beat you, sold you, valued you at $30,000 and whatever Victor wanted to do with you. He's screaming in a basement because he lied to a man who doesn't tolerate lies and because he thought he could play in a world he didn't understand. Do I feel sympathy for him? No. Do I lose sleep over his suffering? Also no. That's cold. That's practical." Roman stood, moved to the sideboard, poured 2 glasses of whiskey without asking if she wanted one. "You want me to feel guilty for letting him face consequences? Fine. I'll feel guilty right after I feel guilty for every other person who's made terrible choices and paid terrible prices. The world is full of victims, Lena. The question is whether you want to be one of them or whether you want to be something else." He handed her a glass and Lena took it, the crystal heavy in her hand. "What if I don't want to be either? What if I just want to be normal? Normal people don't crash into my car. Normal people don't get targeted by Victor Soren. Normal people don't sit in mob bosses' studies at midnight asking philosophical questions about guilt." Roman's smile was slight, almost fond. "You stopped being normal the moment Brandon decided you were for sale. Now you get to decide what you become instead." Lena sipped the whiskey, letting it burn. "Dmitri said pain is information, that you listen to your body and adapt. Dmitri's smart. What's your body telling you? That I'm furious, that I want to hurt everyone who tried to hurt me, that normal Lena Cross would be horrified by what I'm thinking right now." She met Roman's eyes. "Is that what you want? To turn me into someone who doesn't feel guilty about violence?" "Basuolkis ters eyinin." I want you to survive. What you become in the process of surviving is up to you. Roman sat on the edge of his desk, close enough that Lena could see the faint scar along his jaw, the kind of imperfection that made him somehow more real. But I'll tell you what I told my sister before she married the man who killed her. Guilt is useful when it stops you from becoming a monster. It's useless when it stops you from protecting yourself. And if I can't tell the difference, then you trust people who can. People who've walked this path longer than you. His voice dropped, became something more serious. I'm not a good man, Lena. I've done things that would make you sick if you knew the details. But I keep my promises, I protect what's mine, and I don't pretend to be something I'm not. If you stay under my protection, you'll be safe. If you trust me to teach you how to survive this world, I'll make sure you're ready. But you have to actually trust me, which means deciding whether you believe I'm someone worth trusting. The question hung between them, heavy with implications that went beyond simple survival. Lena looked at Roman DeLuca, murderer, crime lord, the kind of man her entire life had taught her to avoid, and tried to reconcile him with the person who'd saved her from Brandon, who'd shared the story of his sister's death, who'd offered her a choice instead of simply making decisions for her. The money you're stealing from Victor, the $4 million, what happens to it? Roman's eyebrow lifted slightly, like he hadn't expected that question. Part of it goes to operational costs, part gets laundered through legitimate businesses. Part gets distributed to people who need it more than Victor does. Like Maria's family, among others. Roman finished his whiskey, set the glass down. The DeLuca family has been in this city for 3 generations. We take care of our people. The neighborhoods we control are safer than the ones we don't. The businesses we protect actually thrive, and the people who work for us know they'll be compensated fairly. It's still crime, Lena. Still illegal. Still violent when it needs to be. But it's crime with rules, with honor, with something resembling a code. And Victor doesn't have that code. Victor has ambition and cruelty and nothing else. He burns through people and territories like they're disposable, takes everything and gives nothing back. If he consolidates power, this city gets worse. More violence, more exploitation, more people like Brandon thinking they can sell their girlfriends to settle debts. Roman's expression hardened. So yes, I'm stealing his money. And yes, I'm going to keep making his life difficult until he either backs down or makes a mistake big enough that I can end him permanently. And I'm part of that strategy. You're part of the reason it became urgent, but you're also... Roman paused, seemed to choose his words carefully. You're also someone I'd protect regardless of strategy. Because protecting people Victor wants to hurt is the right thing to do, even in a world where right and wrong get complicated. Lena finished her own whiskey, felt the warmth spreading through her chest. The anger was still there, simmering under everything else. But it had company now. Curiosity. Determination. Something that might become trust if she let it. I want to help. Help how? With the theft, with whatever you're planning. I want to be involved, not just protected. Lena leaned forward. You said I need to become a weapon instead of a tool. Fine. Start teaching me how. Roman studied her for a long moment, and Lena had the sense of being evaluated against criteria she couldn't see. Finally, he nodded. Training intensifies tomorrow. Dmitri handles physical skills, but you'll also work with Elena. She handles intelligence, research, the kind of work that doesn't require throwing people around. And you'll sit in on planning meetings, learn how we operate, understand the infrastructure. He stood, offered her his hand to help her up. But understand something, Lena. Once you're involved, once you actively participate in what we do, there's no going back to normal. No claiming innocence, no pretending you didn't know what you were part of. You sure that's what you want? Lena took his hand, let him pull her to her feet. Her ribs protested, but she ignored them. Normal got me sold for $30,000. I'll take my chances with not normal. Roman's smile was slow, dangerous, and somehow warm all at once. Then welcome to the family, Lena Cross. Try not to die during training. The next 3 days blurred together into a rhythm of pain, learning, and transformation that left Lena wondering who she'd been before the crash. Dmitri worked her through combat drills that her injured ribs turned into torture sessions, but he never let her quit. When she collapsed on the mat, gasping and cursing, he'd wait exactly 30 seconds before hauling her back to her feet. Pain is temporary. Dead is permanent. Again. Elena turned out to be Roman's cousin, a sharp-eyed woman in her 30s who ran intelligence operations from a room that looked like mission control for a small military operation. 6 monitors, police scanners, encrypted phones, and servers that hummed with the kind of processing power that definitely wasn't legal. Information is the real weapon, Elena said on Lena's first day, barely looking up from her screens. Guns and fists are just the cleanup crew. You want to survive? Learn to see patterns before they become problems. She taught Lena how to read surveillance footage, how to spot tells in body language, how to track people through social media and financial records without leaving digital fingerprints. Lena's physical therapy background gave her an unexpected advantage. She was already trained to observe movement, to notice compensatory patterns, to read pain and weakness in how people carried themselves. That's actually useful, Elena admitted after Lena correctly identified an injured leg in a target's gait from grainy security footage. Most of my analysts couldn't catch that. Roman was right about you. Right about what? That you're smarter than you think you are, and more ruthless than you want to admit. Elena finally looked at her directly. You agreed to help steal $4 million after knowing Roman for less than 48 hours. That's either incredibly stupid or incredibly calculated. I'm betting on calculated. Lena thought about that while she iced her ribs that evening, sitting in the library where Roman kept first editions that probably cost more than cars. Was it calculated? Or was it just anger looking for an outlet, rage that needed somewhere to go before it consumed her from the inside? The news played on the television mounted above the fireplace, and Lena's attention caught on a familiar face. Brandon, smiling in what looked like a college photo, beneath a headline that made her stomach drop. Local man found dead in apparent gang violence. Brandon Vale, 26, was discovered in an abandoned warehouse in Queens early this morning. Police are investigating but have few leads. The news anchor's voice continued, detailing Brandon's history, his connections to known drug dealers, speculation about debts and retribution. They showed footage of the warehouse, crime scene tape, police cars with flashing lights. No mention of Lena, no mention of Victor. Just another casualty in a city full of violence that most people tried hard not to see. He lasted longer than I expected. Roman's voice came from the doorway. He'd been out all day, handling business Lena wasn't cleared to know about yet. Victor must have believed his story for a while. Lena couldn't look away from the screen. Brandon's mother was crying in an interview, talking about her baby boy, how he'd had problems but was trying to turn his life around. The lies people told themselves about the dead were almost beautiful in their desperation. I should feel something, Lena said quietly. Guilt or sadness or I don't know, something, but I just feel empty. Roman moved into the room, poured himself a drink from the crystal decanter. You feel what you feel. Don't perform emotions you don't have just because you think you should. What does that make me? That I can watch my ex-boyfriend's mother cry on television and feel nothing? Human. Roman sat in the chair across from her. Brandon made choices that led to this. He chose to get involved with Victor, chose to see you as a commodity, chose to lie to a man who kills people for lying. You didn't pull the trigger, Lena. You just stopped being his victim. The word victim stung more than it should have. Lena had spent months being Brandon's victim, making excuses, accepting blame, shrinking herself to fit into the space he allowed her. The woman who'd done that felt like a stranger now, someone weak and foolish who Lena couldn't quite remember being. Elena said I'm more ruthless than I want to admit. Elena's usually right about people. Roman studied her over the rim of his glass. Does that bother you? It should, shouldn't it? Normal people feel bad when their ex-boyfriends die. Normal people's ex-boyfriends don't try to sell them to crime lords. Stop comparing yourself to normal, Lena. That life's gone. The question is whether you can live with who you're becoming instead. Before Lena could answer, Marco appeared in the doorway, his expression tight. Boss, we've got a problem. Lucian's here, says it's urgent. Roman's jaw tightened slightly, the only sign of irritation. Tell him I'll be there in 5 minutes. After Marco left, Roman stood, drained his glass. Lucien's my second in command, handles most of the day-to-day operations. He's not supposed to be here tonight, which means something's wrong. Should I leave? No, come with me. You wanted to be involved. This is what involved looks like. Roman waited while Lena stood, her ribs protesting after a day of Dimitri's training. Just observe. Don't speak unless I ask you a direct question. They found Lucien in Roman's office, pacing like a caged animal. He was younger than Lena expected, maybe 35, with the kind of polished look that belonged in corporate boardrooms rather than criminal enterprises. Expensive suit, perfect haircut, manicured hands that suggested he didn't do his own dirty work. He stopped pacing when Roman entered, his eyes flicking to Lena with obvious curiosity before returning to his boss. We have a situation with the Thursday shipment. Victor moved the schedule up. It's happening tomorrow night instead. Roman's expression didn't change. How do you know? My source inside Victor's operation. Guy I've had on payroll for 6 months. He's solid. Lucien pulled out his phone, showed Roman something Lena couldn't see. Victor's nervous about something. Doubled security on the transport, changed the route, moved everything forward 12 hours. He knows we're planning something. Maybe. Or maybe he's just paranoid. Lucien pocketed his phone. Either way, we need to decide now. Hit the shipment tomorrow with incomplete planning, or abort and wait for another opportunity. Roman moved to his desk, pulled up maps on his computer. Lena watched him work, saw the calculations happening behind his eyes. Risk versus reward, timing versus preparation, all the invisible math that went into decisions most people never had to make. What's your read? Roman asked without looking up. I think we can pull it off. The route change actually works in our favor. Less traffic, fewer witnesses. We'd need to move fast. But the team's ready. Lucien glanced at Lena again. Though maybe this isn't a conversation for she stays. Roman's tone left no room for argument. Lena, what do you think? The question caught her off guard. Me? You've been studying surveillance footage with Elena for 3 days. You've learned how Victor operates. Does this feel like a trap or legitimate caution? Lena's mind raced, pulling together fragments of information Elena had shown her. Victor's patterns, his decision-making process, the way he responded to perceived threats. If he suspected you specifically were planning something, he wouldn't just move the schedule up. He'd cancel entirely, move the money through different channels, maybe set an obvious trap to catch you. This feels more like general paranoia. Agreed. Roman looked at Lucien. We move tomorrow. Alert the team. I want everyone in position by 8 p.m. Standard protocol. No phones. No communication that could be traced back to us. What about the girl? Lucien's tone suggested he thought involving Lena was a mistake. She coming with us? No, she stays here with Elena, monitors communications. Roman met Lena's eyes, and she saw the unspoken message. Not ready yet, but soon. We clear? Lucien nodded, but something in his expression bothered Lena. A flicker of something that might have been calculation, quickly hidden. He left with promises to confirm details, and the moment the door closed, Lena spoke. You don't entirely trust him. Roman's eyebrow raised. What makes you say that? The way you watched him when he was talking, like you were testing his words against something else. Lena moved closer to the desk. And he doesn't like me. Thinks I'm a liability. Lucien's been with me for 8 years. He's earned his position. But trust is complicated in this world. Roman pulled up security footage on his computer, different angles of the office they were standing in. Everyone gets watched. Everyone gets verified. It's not personal. But you do trust him with this. With the shipment. I trust him to do his job. There's a difference. Roman closed the laptop. You're getting better at reading people. Elena's teaching you well. The praise shouldn't have mattered, but it did. Lena found herself wanting to prove she was worth the risk Roman was taking by involving her, worth the protection he was providing. The realization was unsettling. When had she started caring about Roman DeLuca's approval? That night, Lena couldn't sleep. Again. She wandered the mansion, learning its rhythms, the patterns of guards, changing shifts, the sounds that meant someone was in the kitchen versus the study versus the security room. The house had become familiar in ways her old apartment never had, which was disturbing when she let herself think about it too long. She found herself in the library again, drawn to the window that overlooked the garden. Security lights created pools of illumination between shadows where guards patrolled, a fortress pretending to be a home, or maybe the other way around. You should be sleeping. Tomorrow's going to be long. Roman appeared beside her, silent as always. The man moved like a ghost for someone his size. I keep thinking about the shipment, about what happens if it goes wrong. Then people die. Probably mine, possibly Victor's. That's the risk. Roman stood next to her, close enough that she could feel the warmth radiating from him. Having second thoughts about being involved? No, having first thoughts about a lot of things. Lena turned to face him. Why did you really ask my opinion in front of Lucien? You already knew what you thought about Victor's patterns. Because I wanted to see if you'd speak up or defer to the men in the room. And I wanted Lucien to understand that you're not just some girl I'm protecting out of charity. Roman's dark eyes caught the lamplight. You're smart, Lena. Observant. Those are rare qualities, and they're wasted if you hide them to make other people comfortable. Lucien looked like he wanted to argue. Lucien will adapt or he'll find employment elsewhere. I don't keep people who can't evolve with changing circumstances. Roman's hand came up, almost touching her face before he seemed to think better of it and dropped it back to his side. You should try to rest. Elena will have you monitoring multiple channels tomorrow. It requires focus. He was right, but Lena didn't move. Something had shifted between them over the past days, a tension that felt both dangerous and inevitable. Roman DeLuca was a killer, a criminal, everything she should be running from. But he was also the first person in years who'd treated her like she had value beyond what she could provide, who'd offered her choices instead of demands. Your sister, Elena, the one who died. What was she like? The question made Roman go still. For a moment, Lena thought he wouldn't answer. Then he moved to the leather couch, sat with the kind of weariness that suggested the day had been longer than it looked. Strong, smarter than me, though she'd never admit it. She wanted out of this family business, wanted normal. Roman's voice went quiet. Met a guy in college, fell in love, thought she could have the white picket fence dream. I told her he was wrong for her, that I saw warning signs. She married him anyway. And he hurt her. For 3 years, started small, the way it always does. Verbal abuse, control, isolation from family. By the time it got physical, she was too deep in to see a way out, or too ashamed to admit I'd been right. Roman's hands flexed. The night she died, she finally called me, asked for help. I was in the middle of a meeting with suppliers, told her I'd call her back in an hour. The silence that followed was heavy with regret. She bled out before the ambulance arrived, internal injuries from weeks of abuse she'd hidden. The husband claimed she fell, and enough people were willing to believe him that it never went anywhere legally. Roman looked at Lena then, and she saw something raw in his expression. He disappeared 6 months later. No one's seen him since. Lena didn't need to ask what happened. The answer was written in Roman's tone, in the cold satisfaction that flickered across his face. Justice, or revenge, or maybe just the inevitable conclusion to a story that started with violence. I'm sorry you lost her. I'm sorry I didn't save her when I had the chance. That's why I helped you, Lena. Not strategy, not because Victor wanted you. Because I saw a woman running into traffic to escape someone, and I remembered Elena running out of options. Moi, c'était... Roman stood, moved back toward the door. Get some sleep. That's an order. After he left, Lena sat in the dark library for another hour, thinking about Elena DeLuca and Brandon Vale and all the ways people hurt each other. Thinking about the woman she'd been a week ago and the woman she was becoming, and whether the distance between them was something to mourn or celebrate. The next day moved with frantic energy. Elena's operation room became command central, monitors displaying traffic cameras, police scanners, encrypted channels to Roman's team. Lena watched Elena work with the kind of focused intensity that made her understand why Roman trusted his cousin with intelligence operations. The shipment leaves Victor's warehouse at 9 p.m. 2 armored trucks, chase car, standard rotation. Elena pulled up maps, highlighted routes. Roman's team intercepts here at the junction where the route narrows. Quick hit, in and out before police response. What's my job? Monitor police channels, traffic cams, anything that could indicate problems. You see cops moving toward the intercept point, you alert me immediately. You see Victor's people deviating from the planned route, same thing. Elena handed her a headset. Don't talk unless it's urgent. Roman needs clean communication. By 8:30, Lena's nerves were vibrating. She watched multiple screens simultaneously, tracking police dispatch, traffic patterns, weather reports. The city looked peaceful from up here, just lights and movement, no indication of the violence being planned in its shadows. At 8:55, Roman's voice came through the channel, calm and professional. All teams in position. We're green. Elena acknowledged, then switched to a private channel. Stay sharp, cousin. Something feels off about the timing change. Noted. We're committed now. The minutes crawled. Lena watched the armored trucks leave Victor's warehouse exactly on schedule, followed by the chase car. 3 vehicles moving through Manhattan like they had every right to be there, carrying $4 million in cash that would never reach its destination. Elena tracked their progress, calling out intersections, verifying the route. Everything matched Lucian's intelligence. The trucks moved steadily toward the intercept point, and Lena could see Roman's team on traffic cameras, positioned perfectly. Then everything went wrong at once. We've got company! Marco's voice cracked through the channel. 4 additional vehicles, heavily armed. This is a setup. Gunfire erupted across the audio feed. Elena's hands flew across keyboards, pulling up camera angles, trying to see what was happening. Lena watched in horror as the screen showed Victor's men pouring out of vehicles that shouldn't have been there, surrounding Roman's team. Abort! Abort and fall back! Roman's voice stayed level despite the chaos. North exit, go now! More gunfire, shouting, the sickening crunch of metal on metal as vehicles collided. Elena was on multiple channels simultaneously, coordinating extraction, calling in backup, her face set in grim determination. Police are responding, Lena called out, watching dispatch channels light up. Multiple units heading to the scene. Roman, you've got maybe 3 minutes before NYPD arrives in force. Elena's voice was sharp. Get out now. Working on it. We've got wounded. Marco took a round, Sal's down. Lena's hands shook as she watched the cameras. She could see muzzle flashes, people running, the organized chaos of a fight that had gone completely sideways. This was supposed to be quick, clean, no casualties. Instead, it looked like a war zone. Elena made rapid calculations, pulled up alternative routes. There's a service alley 2 blocks east. Can you make it? Trying. Victor's men are... Roman's voice cut off as more gunfire exploded through the speakers. The next 10 minutes felt like hours. Lena tracked police response, called out units getting too close, watched helplessly as Roman's team fought their way out of the ambush. By the time they finally made it to extraction vehicles, 2 men were seriously wounded, and the police were close enough that Elena had to orchestrate a chase through Manhattan that left Lena's heart hammering. They made it back to the mansion just after midnight. Lena ran down to meet them as vehicles screeched through the gates. Dr. Chen was already there, his medical bag open, moving toward the wounded with practiced efficiency. Roman emerged from the lead vehicle, his suit torn and blood-spattered, a cut above his left eye that would definitely scar. He saw Lena and something flickered in his expression before the professional mask slammed back down. Secure the perimeter. I want everyone accounted for and doubled security tonight. He rattled off orders while Dr. Chen worked on Marco, who was conscious but pale from blood loss. Elena, I need a full analysis of what happened, how Victor knew we were coming. Already on it. Elena appeared from the house, tablet in hand, her expression murderous. This was planned, Roman. They were waiting for us. The timing changed, the route, all of it was bait. Which means we have a leak. Roman's voice went cold. Someone told Victor we were planning to hit the shipment. Lena's mind immediately went to Lucian, to the flicker of calculation she'd seen in his expression. She opened her mouth to say something, but Roman's phone rang. He checked the caller ID and his jaw tightened. Unknown number, could be Victor. He answered, put it on speaker. This is DeLuca. Roman, I hope your evening was educational. Victor Soren's voice was smooth, cultured, the kind of voice that belonged to someone who'd never had to raise it to be frightening. Did you enjoy my little surprise? What do you want, Victor? To have a conversation. An honest one, between professionals. Victor paused, and Lena could hear classical music playing in the background. You have something I want. I have information you need. I propose an exchange. I'm listening. Tomorrow night, neutral ground. You bring Lena Cross, alive and unharmed, and I'll tell you which of your trusted people has been working for me. Victor's tone suggested he was enjoying this. You have 12 hours to decide. If you refuse, well, I'm sure you can imagine what happens to your organization when you can't trust anyone around you. The line went dead. The silence that followed was absolute. Everyone in the courtyard had heard. Everyone was processing what it meant. Lena felt their eyes on her, felt the weight of being the bargaining chip in a game she was only beginning to understand. Roman's expression was carved from stone. When he spoke, his voice could have frozen blood. Get inside. All of you. War Council in 20 minutes. He looked at Lena. You too. You're part of this now. The War Council assembled in Roman's dining room looked like something from a crime film, except the blood on people's clothes was real and the anger crackling through the air could have started fires. Marco sat with his shoulder bandaged, his face gray but his eyes sharp. Sal had been rushed to a private hospital, the kind that didn't ask questions, with a bullet that had shattered his collarbone. The others who'd survived the ambush filled the chairs around the table, all of them watching Roman with the intensity of soldiers waiting for orders from a general who just walked them into a massacre. Lena took a seat near Elena, feeling like an intruder despite Roman's direct invitation. She'd watched the ambush unfold on screen, safe in the mansion, while these people had been bleeding in the streets. The guilt sat heavy in her chest, irrational but persistent. Roman stood at the head of the table, still in his blood-stained clothes, the cut above his eye cleaned but not bandaged. He looked like violence personified, and when he spoke, his voice was cold enough to make the temperature drop. Victor knew every detail of tonight's operation: timing, location, team composition, extraction routes, which means someone in this organization gave him that information. He let that sink in, watching faces. I want theories. Now. Lucien brought us the intel about the schedule change. This from Tony, the young guard who'd escorted Lena around the mansion her first day. He's the one who pushed for moving up the timeline. Lucien's been with us for 8 years. Marco's voice was rough with pain. He's proven himself dozens of times. Why would he flip now? Money, leverage. Victor's good at finding pressure points. Elena had her tablet out, already pulling up files. Or maybe it's been longer than we think. Maybe he's been feeding Victor information for months, and tonight was just the first time it mattered enough for us to notice. Roman's jaw tightened. Where is Lucien now? I sent him to coordinate with our contacts in the police department. Make sure tonight's mess doesn't blow back on us legally. Marco shifted in his chair, wincing. He left about an hour before we did. Convenient timing. Roman pulled out his phone, dialed. The call went to voicemail. Lucien, it's Roman. Call me immediately. We have a situation. He hung up, dialed another number. This is DeLuca. I need a location on Lucien Cardoza. Full surveillance, everything you've got. I want to know where he is, who he's talking to, and what he had for breakfast this morning. A pause. No, I don't care what it costs. Do it now. After he hung up, the room sat in tense silence. Lena watched Roman pace, saw the calculations running behind his eyes. He was processing betrayal, running through years of trust and loyalty to figure out where it had fractured, when faith had turned into a weapon being used against him. We need to assume Victor has access to everything Lucien knew. Elena was typing rapidly, her screens reflecting in her glasses. Operational details, financial records, personnel files, safe house locations. If Lucien's been reporting to Victor, we're completely exposed. Then we change everything. New protocols, new communication channels, new safe houses. Roman stopped pacing, looked at Marco. How bad is the damage from tonight? 2 wounded, both stable, lost 1 vehicle, maybe 2 if the cops impounded the second one, burned 3 extraction routes. Marco's expression was grim. But the real damage is credibility. Victor set a trap and we walked into it. Word gets out, people start thinking we're weak, vulnerable. Other crews might decide it's a good time to test us. Let them try. Roman's smile was nothing but edges. Victor wants to play games. We'll show him what happens when you mistake patience for weakness. But first, we deal with the immediate problem. Victor wants me. Lena heard herself say it, and every eye turned toward her. That's what the call was about. He wants you to hand me over in exchange for the name of your leak, which is a trap. Elena didn't look up from her screens. Even if he tells you it's Lucien, which we already suspect, the moment you show up with Lena, he'll take you both. Victor doesn't make fair trades. He makes power plays. Agreed. Roman moved back to the table, leaned against it, but he also just showed us something useful. He's desperate enough to make contact directly, which means the leak isn't giving him everything he needs. There's something he wants that he can't get through Lucy. And me. Lena's mind was racing, pieces clicking together. He still wants me. The medical knowledge, the leverage, whatever his original plan was. Brandon's dead, so he lost that acquisition route. Now he's trying a different approach. More than that, Roman's dark eyes locked on hers. He's trying to humiliate me. Taking you publicly, after I've given you protection, sends a message to everyone watching that Roman DeLuca can't protect what's his, that I'm weak. The possessive phrasing should have bothered Lena. Instead, it sent something warm and dangerous curling through her chest. She pushed the feeling aside, focused on the tactical problem. So we don't give him what he wants. We give him something else. Like what? Tony asked. Lena looked at Roman, saw the moment he understood where her mind was going. His expression shifted from cold calculation to something almost predatory. We give him a meeting, on our terms, our location, with Lena as bait. Roman's smile was sharp. But instead of handing her over, we turn the trap around. Use the meeting to identify everyone in Victor's inner circle who shows up, map his security protocols, and get close enough to finish this permanently. That's insane. Marco shook his head. Victor's not stupid. He'll have that location locked down, snipers on the roofs, enough firepower to level a building. You walk into that, you're not walking out. Not if we plan it right. Elena was already pulling up maps, possible locations. Victor wants a neutral location, somewhere public enough that he feels safe but private enough for a meeting. We suggest somewhere we can control the variables. The warehouse district. This from Dmitri, who'd been silent until now. Old industrial zone, lots of abandoned buildings, multiple entry and exit points. We can position people, set up surveillance, have backup in place before Victor even arrives. Roman nodded slowly. We'd need to sell it, make Victor think he's the one in control, that we're desperate enough to agree to his terms. You'd also need to sell me. Lena's voice came out steadier than she felt. I have to look like I'm actually being handed over. Scared, compliant, whatever Victor expects. If I look too confident, too prepared, he'll know it's a setup. The room went quiet. Roman stared at her, and Lena could see him working through scenarios, calculating risks, weighing her life against the strategic advantage. No. His voice was flat. Too dangerous. Victor's people would have you in custody, even briefly. Anything could go wrong. Anything could go wrong anyway. At least this way, I'm an active participant instead of a liability you're trying to protect. Lena stood, moved closer to Roman. You said I needed to become a weapon instead of a tool. Let me be one. Being a weapon doesn't mean throwing yourself at enemy fire. Doesn't it? Isn't that exactly what you did tonight? Lena gestured at his torn suit, the cut above his eye. You led your team into what you thought was a straightforward operation and walked into an ambush, but you're still standing here, still planning the next move. I can do the same thing. Roman's expression was unreadable, but Lena saw something shift behind his eyes. Respect, maybe, or recognition. You understand what you're suggesting. If this goes wrong, if Victor gets his hands on you for real, what he'll do. I watched the video of what he did to Brandon. I know exactly what he's capable of. Lena's hands were steady, but I also know that hiding in this mansion while other people fight my battles isn't survival. It's just a slower kind of death. Elena cleared her throat. If we're actually considering this, we need extensive planning. Lena would need a wire, some kind of tracking device, backup positioned close enough to intervene if things deteriorate. And we'd need leverage to ensure Victor doesn't just take her and leave. The leak. Marco's eyes lit up. We tell Victor we'll bring Lena, but only if he brings proof of who's been informing for him. Documentation, recordings, something concrete. Makes it look like we don't fully trust him, which he'd expect, and gives us a reason to have people close by to verify the intelligence. And if the leak really is Lucien? Tony asked. What do we do with that information? Roman's expression went cold. We use it. If Lucien's been betraying us, he becomes an asset. We feed him false information, let him run back to Victor with it, use the connection to set up a bigger trap, turn Victor's weapon against him. The plan crystallized over the next hour, refined through debate and contingency planning until it looked almost feasible. Almost. Lena watched Roman work, saw how he commanded the room without raising his voice, how people deferred to his judgment while still offering their own expertise. This was leadership built on respect and fear in equal measure, and it was more impressive than she wanted to admit. By 3 a.m, they had a framework. Roman would call Victor back at dawn, agree to the meeting with conditions. The warehouse district tomorrow night, Lena in exchange for proof of the leak. Both sides could bring 5 people maximum. No heavy weapons, no vehicles within 2 blocks of the meeting point. Violations would void the deal. He won't follow those rules, Elena said flatly. Victor will have people positioned everywhere, weapons hidden, contingencies for every scenario. Of course he will. So will we. Roman looked exhausted, the kind of bone-deep weariness that came from betrayal and violence in equal measure. Meeting adjourned. Everyone get medical attention if you need it, then sleep. We reconvene at 8 a.m. The room cleared slowly, people limping toward treatment or rest. Lena stayed, helping Elena pack up her equipment, neither of them speaking until they were alone with Roman. This is a terrible plan, Elena said quietly. You know that, right? The probability of this going sideways is astronomical. You have a better idea? Run. Take Lena, liquidate what assets you can, and disappear. Victor controls too much of the city now. This war is going to destroy everything our family built. Elena's voice cracked slightly. I don't want to lose you the way we lost Elena. Roman pulled his cousin into a hug, the first genuine display of affection Lena had seen from him. I'm not going anywhere, and we're not running. The DeLucas don't abandon territory because some upstart thinks he can take it. After Elena left, Lena and Roman stood in the dining room surrounded by maps and battle plans, the weight of tomorrow pressing down like a physical force. You should get some sleep too, Roman said without looking at her. Tomorrow's going to be brutal. So is tonight, apparently. Every time I close my eyes, I see that ambush on the monitors. See your people getting shot. Lena moved to the window, watched the garden lights reflect off morning dew. I did this. My existence is why Victor's pushing so hard, why he set that trap, why people got hurt tonight. No, Victor's ambition is why people got hurt. You're just the excuse he's using this week. Roman joined her at the window. Next week it would be something else, territory dispute, pride, a perceived slight. Men like Victor don't need real reasons. They create them. Still feels like my fault. It's not, but I understand the impulse to accept blame for things outside your control. Roman's voice went softer. Elena, my sister, she used to do that. Apologize for her husband's violence, make excuses, convince herself she'd provoked him somehow. Took her years to understand that his choices weren't her responsibility. Lena turned to face him. Do you think about her a lot? Every day, especially when I see someone else in a similar situation. Roman's hand came up, traced the fading bruise on Lena's cheek from the car accident. His touch was surprisingly gentle. You remind me of her sometimes. The strength hiding under fear. The intelligence you've been taught to suppress. The anger you're not allowed to express. I'm expressing it now. Yes, you are. Roman's thumb brushed along her jawline, and the air between them suddenly felt charged with something that had nothing to do with strategy, which is either the smartest or stupidest thing you could do in your situation. I haven't decided which yet. Lena's heart was hammering. What would Elena say if she could see this? Probably that I'm an idiot for getting emotionally involved with someone I'm trying to protect, that mixing personal feelings with tactical decisions gets people killed. Roman's hand dropped back to his side. She'd be right. But you're doing it anyway. Apparently. Roman's smile was tired, almost vulnerable. You're supposed to be a strategic asset, Lena. Someone I keep safe to deny Victor a resource and because it's the right thing to do. You're not supposed to be someone I care about beyond their tactical value. And yet I find myself reconsidering everything about tomorrow's plan, because the thought of you in Victor's hands makes me want to burn his entire organization to the ground. Roman's voice had gone rough. That's a problem. That's how people make mistakes. Lena stepped closer, close enough to feel the heat coming off him, smell the faint traces of gunpowder and expensive cologne. Maybe it's not a mistake. Maybe it's just complicated. Complicated gets people killed in my world. Your world almost got me killed before I even knew you. At least now I'm making my own choices about the risks I take. Lena's hand came up, touched the cut above Roman's eye. Does it hurt? Yes. Good. Pain is information, right? Tells you what's damaged so you can adapt. She traced the line of the cut gently. What's this telling you? That I walked into an ambush because I was distracted. That Lucien's betrayal caught me off guard because I wanted to believe loyalty was enough. That I'm making decisions based on what I want instead of what's smart. Roman caught her hand, held it against his face. And that I'm about to make another one. He kissed her like he fought, with intensity that bordered on violence but somehow stopped just short of crossing the line. Lena kissed him back, pouring all her anger and fear and desperate need for control into it, tasting blood from his split lip and not caring. This was stupid, reckless, exactly the kind of emotional complication that could destroy tomorrow's plan and probably get them both killed. She didn't care. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Roman rested his forehead against hers. This can't happen again, not until after tomorrow, not until we're both sure we're making decisions with clear heads. Agreed. Lena's voice was shaky. Terrible timing, terrible idea. Absolutely. Neither of them moved. Finally, Roman stepped back, putting physical distance between them, like it could somehow restore the professional boundaries they'd just incinerated. Get some sleep, Lena. I need you sharp tomorrow. Same to you. Lena made it halfway to the door before Roman spoke again. For what it's worth, you were right earlier, about becoming a weapon. You're going to do just fine tomorrow. The confidence in his voice should have been reassuring. Instead, it felt like a prophecy that could cut either way, salvation or destruction balanced on the same blade. She went upstairs, crawled into the expensive bed in the guest room that had somehow become her room, and tried to sleep. Her mind wouldn't shut down. She kept running through tomorrow's plan, looking for holes for the inevitable moment when things would go wrong. Because they would go wrong. Plans this complicated always did. The question was whether she'd be ready when they did. Lena must have dozed eventually because she woke to Maria knocking on her door, delivering breakfast, and the news that Roman wanted her in the training facility in 30 minutes. Dmitri worked her harder than ever, running through scenarios, teaching her how to move like she was scared without actually being helpless, how to sell vulnerability while maintaining awareness. He taught her pressure points on the human body, places where a thumb pressed just right could disable someone long enough to run, taught her how to use her physical therapy knowledge of anatomy as a weapon. You are small, but smart. Smart beats strong if smart is fast enough. Dmitri demonstrated a move where Lena's fingers would go into an attacker's throat. You do this. They cannot breathe, cannot chase. You run. What if there's more than one? Then you be smarter than all of them, or you die. Is simple math. Dmitri's expression softened slightly. You have good instincts. Trust them tomorrow. Trust Roman. Trust yourself. In that order. By noon, Lena was exhausted and covered in bruises from practicing falls and strikes. She showered, changed into clothes Elena had selected, designer jeans and a sweater that looked expensive but not ostentatious, the kind of thing that said valuable but not trying too hard, and joined the final planning session. The dining room had been transformed into an operations center. Maps covered the walls, photographs of the warehouse district pinned alongside diagrams of sightlines and access points. Roman stood at the center of it, looking like he hadn't slept at all, directing placement of personnel with the precision of a general planning an invasion. Lena arrives with me and Marco. Elena and Dmitri are backup, positioned in adjacent buildings with Overwatch. Roman traced routes on the map. Tony handles communications, monitors police channels and emergency services. Everyone else is perimeter security, making sure Victor doesn't flood the zone with reinforcements. What about Lucien? Marco asked. He still hasn't called back. Roman's expression went cold. Then we proceed assuming he's compromised. He doesn't get details about tonight. If he reaches out, we tell him we're handling a separate situation and don't need his involvement. He's going to know something's up. Let him. If he reports to Victor, it doesn't change the plan. Victor already expects us to be cautious. Roman looked at Lena. You ready? As ready as I'll ever be for walking into a meeting with a man who wants to kidnap me. Fair assessment. Roman pulled out a small device, no bigger than a button. This is your tracker. Elena will sew it into the lining of your jacket. Even if they search you, they won't find it unless they're specifically looking. It broadcasts your location to our entire team. Elena held up a second device, this one thinner, almost invisible. And this is your wire. Adhesive backing goes under your collarbone. Your shirt will hide it, and it's flesh-toned enough that even direct light won't make it obvious. We'll hear everything you hear. Lena took both devices, felt their weight in her palm. Such small things to bet her life on. The afternoon dissolved into final preparations. Lena was fitted with the wire and tracker, both uncomfortable in ways that made her constantly aware of their presence. Elena walked her through communication protocols, what phrases would signal distress versus tactical updates. If you say, I need air, we move in immediately. If you say, I understand, it means you've identified something important and we should pay attention. If you say anything about wanting to go home, that's the abort code. We extract you regardless of cost. Elena's hands were steady as she adjusted the wire. Don't be a hero, Lena. If this goes bad, you get out. We'll handle the rest. What if I can't get out? Then Roman will come get you, even if it means starting a war in the middle of Manhattan. Elena's smile was thin. I've known my cousin his entire life. I've never seen him like this about anyone. So trust that he's not going to leave you in Victor's hands, no matter what it costs him. The words should have been comforting. Instead, they made the pressure worse. Lena wasn't just risking her own life tonight. She was risking Roman's and his organization and everyone loyal to him. The weight of that responsibility felt crushing. By 6 p.m., everyone was in position. Lena rode with Roman and Marco in an SUV that looked identical to the one she'd crashed into a week ago. The irony wasn't lost on her. Victor's already at the location, Elena's voice came through the earpiece. Showed up 20 minutes early with 8 people, not 5. So much for following the rules. Expected. Roman's voice was calm. We have him outnumbered anyway. He just doesn't know it yet. They drove through the warehouse district as dusk settled over the city, turning buildings into hulking shadows against a purple sky. The location Victor had ultimately agreed to was an old textile factory, abandoned for years, surrounded by other empty buildings that made perfect sniper positions. Dmitri, Elena, status? In position. I've got clear line of sight on the main entrance and 3 of Victor's people on the roof. Dmitri's voice crackled slightly. Also seeing heat signatures in the building across from me. Victor has more people than he showed. Of course he does. Everyone stay sharp. Marco, with me. Lena, remember the protocols. They parked 2 blocks away, walked the remaining distance. Lena kept her breathing steady, forced herself to look nervous without overdoing it. Scared prey, not angry predator. Victor needed to see what he expected. The factory's main entrance was lit by portable lights that created harsh shadows. Victor Soren stood at the center of the space, flanked by 6 men who looked like they ate smaller criminals for breakfast. He was exactly like his photographs. Silver hair, predator's face, expensive suit that probably cost more than a car. He smiled when he saw them approach, the kind of smile that promised pain. Roman, punctual as always, and this must be the famous Lena Cross. Victor's eyes traveled over her like she was livestock being evaluated. Brandon described you well, though he failed to mention how striking you are. Brandon failed to mention a lot of things, Lena said, letting her voice shake slightly, like planning to sell me. Business, my dear, nothing personal. Victor's attention shifted to Roman. I see you brought Marco. Good choice. He's survived, what, 3 attempts on his life working for you? That's impressive longevity in our profession. You wanted a meeting. We're here. Where's your proof? Roman's voice was ice. Victor gestured, and one of his men brought forward a tablet. Everything you need is here. Communications between your leak and my organization. Financial transactions. Meeting logs. Dates, times, details of information provided. He held it just out of reach. But first, I want to verify the merchandise. I'm not merchandise. Lena let anger bleed into her fear. I'm a person. You're whatever I say you are once you're in my custody, which you will be momentarily. Victor's smile widened. Roman, I'm impressed you actually brought her. I had perhaps 50-50 odds you'd try something clever instead. Shows you're more pragmatic than I gave you credit for. Shows I want to know who's been betraying me. Roman's hand stayed steady at his side, but Lena could feel the tension radiating off him. Let's see the proof. Victor turned the tablet around. Even from her position, Lena could see communication logs, financial transfers, documentation that looked convincingly real. And there, at the top of the most recent message thread, was a name that made her stomach drop. Not Lucien. Elena. Roman's cousin. The woman who'd taught Lena intelligence work, who'd coordinated their operations, who'd had access to absolutely everything. The betrayal on Roman's face was there and gone in an instant, replaced by cold rage that could have frozen the air. Elena? Roman's voice was barely above a whisper. You're lying. Am I? Check the metadata, Roman. Check the financial transactions. Your dear cousin has been very well compensated for her services. Victor looked pleased with himself. Lucien was a red herring. Someone for you to suspect while Elena continued feeding me everything I needed. The ambush last night? Her routing suggestions made it possible. She positioned your people exactly where I needed them. Lena's mind raced. Elena had been in the operations room during the ambush, had coordinated extraction, had seemed genuinely concerned when things went wrong. But she'd also suggested the route, had also known every detail of the plan, had also had opportunity to communicate with Victor during the chaos. I want her verified, Roman said. Put Elena on the phone, now. Alas, she's currently indisposed. Decided it was time to collect her final payment and disappear before you figured things out. Victor's men started moving, slowly encircling their position. But you're welcome to try reaching her yourself, though I suspect her phone is turned off by now. Roman's hand moved toward his phone, and that's when everything exploded into chaos. Gunfire erupted from the rooftops, but not from Victor's men. Dimitri's voice crackled through the earpiece, sharp and furious. That tablet is fake! Elena is here with me. She's been here the whole time. It's a setup. Get out now! Roman moved before Victor could react, pulling Lena behind him as Marco drew his weapon. But Victor's men were faster, closing the circle, guns appearing from underneath jackets and behind crates. The factory floor turned into a kill box in seconds. I was hoping you'd bring more people, Victor said, his voice carrying over the chaos. Makes this so much more satisfying. You see, Roman, I don't actually want Lena. Well, I do, but she's secondary. What I really want is you, destroyed, humiliated, and dead. Everything else is just theater. More of Victor's people emerged from the shadows, at least 20 armed men flooding into the space. The 8 Victor had shown initially had been bait, just like the fake evidence about Elena. Lena's heart hammered as she calculated angles, exits, the impossible math of surviving when they were outnumbered 4-1. Roman's hand found hers squeezed once. The message was clear. Stay close, stay alive, trust me. Then the lights went out. The factory plunged into darkness, broken only by muzzle flashes and the emergency lights from the portable generators. Elena's voice came through the earpiece, cold and professional. Cutting their communications now. Roman, northwest corner, service door. Dimitri's covering your exit. They ran. Marco laid down suppressing fire while Roman pulled Lena through the darkness, navigating by memory and instinct. Bullets tore through the air close enough that Lena felt the displacement against her skin. Someone screamed behind them, the sound cut short by more gunfire. The service door exploded inward as Dmitri kicked it open from the outside, his rifle already tracking targets. "Move! I've got 6 more coming around the east side." They burst into the alley, and Lena saw the full scope of what Roman had actually planned. There were at least 30 people in DeLuca colors positioned throughout the surrounding buildings, and they'd all opened fire simultaneously. Victor's ambush had walked into a bigger ambush, and the warehouse district had turned into a war zone. "Elena, where's Victor?" Roman's voice was steady despite running full speed. "Still inside the factory, 3rd floor. He went up when the shooting started, probably heading for the roof extraction." Elena's typing was audible through the comm. "But Roman, there's something else. I've been tracking Lucian's phone. He's here, in the building directly east of your position." They skidded around a corner, and Lena saw Lucian standing on a fire escape 2 stories up, phone to his ear, watching the chaos below with an expression that made her blood run cold. Not fear. Satisfaction. He was smiling. Roman saw him at the same moment. Their eyes met across the distance, and Lucien's smile widened into something grotesque. He raised his phone, showed them the screen. Lena was too far away to read it, but Roman's entire body went rigid. "He's got a detonator," Marco said, breathing hard. "Boss, the factory is rigged. He's going to blow it with our people still inside." Lucian's voice carried down to them, theatrical and proud. "Did you really think Victor was the only one playing chess, Roman? I've been planning this for 2 years. Every operation, every decision, every person you trusted. I've been 3 steps ahead the entire time. Victor was just a convenient partner, but this is my endgame." "Why?" Roman's voice cracked with something raw. 8 years, Lucian. I trusted you with everything. And that was your mistake. You gave me access, taught me how the Empire works, showed me every weakness in your armor. Then you kept me as your second forever, never quite trusting me enough for real power. Did you know your father promised me a full partnership? Before he died, he told me I'd earned it. But then you took over and decided I hadn't earned anything, that I needed to prove myself over and over while you sat on a throne I helped build." Lucian's finger hovered over the detonator. "So I found someone who appreciated my talents, someone who understood that loyalty should be rewarded, not taken for granted." Victor doesn't reward loyalty. He uses people and disposes of them. Roman's hand was steady on his gun, but Lena could see the calculation in his eyes. Too far for a clean shot, too risky with the detonator. "Then I'll dispose of him after I dispose of you. I've already got half his operation ready to flip the moment he's dead. Did you think I was actually loyal to him either? You both underestimated me. You both thought I was just a competent administrator, a useful tool. Neither of you saw that I was the one really running things." Lena's mind raced. Lucian was too far for Roman to shoot, but he wasn't too far for her. Her physical therapy training had included anatomy, biomechanics, the precise physics of how bodies moved through space. She'd spent the last week learning how to fight, how to think tactically, how to see weakness in what looked like strength. And she'd spent years analyzing human movement, understanding exactly how muscles worked, what happened when balance shifted, when weight distributed wrong. Lucian was standing on a fire escape that looked rusted, leaning against a railing that probably hadn't been inspected in decades. His weight was mostly on his left leg, his right foot just touching the metal grating. The detonator was in his right hand, which meant that hand was his dominant one, which meant if his balance shifted suddenly, he'd instinctively reach out with his left to catch himself, dropping the detonator in the process. Lena moved before she could overthink it. She grabbed a chunk of broken concrete from the ground and threw it with everything she had, not at Lucien, but at the fire escape support beam directly beneath his feet. The concrete hit with a clang that echoed through the alley. The rusted beam, already compromised by years of weather and neglect, cracked. The entire platform tilted violently to the left. Lucien's instinct kicked in exactly as Lena had predicted. His left hand shot out for the railing, his body twisting to maintain balance. The detonator tumbled from his right hand, falling toward the pavement 2 stories below. Dmitri was already moving, sprinting forward to catch it. He He snatched it from the air like it was a football, rolled with the momentum, came up in a crouch. "Got it! Factory is secure!" Lucian screamed, rage and disbelief mixing into something inhuman. He yanked his gun free, aiming not at Roman but at Lena. "You stupid bitch! You just killed yourself!" The shot that killed Lucian came from 3 directions simultaneously, Roman, Marco, and Dmitri all firing at once. Lucien's body jerked backwards, smashed through the rusted railing, and fell. He hit the ground with the kind of wet crunch that meant he wouldn't be getting back up. The silence that followed was broken only by distant gunfire from the factory. Roman was staring at Lena with an expression she couldn't read, something between shock and something else entirely. "How did you know the fire escape would break?" "I didn't, not for certain, but I know physics and I know how much rust compromises structural integrity, and I know that people always reach out with their non-dominant hand when they're falling." Lena's voice was shaking now that the adrenaline was draining. It was maybe 60% odds, but 60% was better than 0. 60%. Roman laughed, the sound slightly unhinged. "You just bet both our lives on 60% odds. You bet mine on worse when you brought me to this meeting." "Fair point." Roman pulled her close, kissed her hard enough to bruise, then pushed her toward Marco. "Get her out of here. I'm finishing this with Victor." "Like hell." Lena grabbed his arm. "You go in there alone, you die. Victor's got 20 men in that building." "Had 20 men. Dimitri's people have been thinning the numbers." Roman checked his weapon, his face settling into something cold and final. "But you're right. Marco, you're with me. Lena, go with Dimitri. Get to the extraction point." "No." The word came out harder than Lena intended. "I'm not running anymore. I'm not hiding while other people fight my battles. You want to finish Victor? I'm coming with you." "Lena, you made me a weapon, Roman. Don't get mad when I decide to use myself." They didn't have time to argue. Elena's voice crackled through the calm, urgent. "Victor's moving toward the roof. He's got 3 people with him and a helicopter inbound. If he gets on that chopper, we lose him." Roman's expression was pure fury, but he nodded once. "Stay behind me. You see an opportunity to run, you take it. Understood?" "Understood." They moved back into the factory, and the scene inside looked like something from a war film. Bodies on the ground, some moving and some not. Dimitri's people were systematically clearing the building, professional and brutal. The portable lights had been shot out, leaving only emergency lighting that cast everything in shades of red. The stairs to the 3rd floor were narrow, exposed, a natural kill zone. Roman went first, moving with the kind of confidence that came from years of survival. Lena followed, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might crack her already damaged ribs. They found Victor on the roof, just as Elena had said. The helicopter was approaching, its spotlight cutting through the night. Victor had 2 men with him now, not 3. One was bleeding from a shoulder wound, leaning heavily against an air conditioning unit. The other looked like a professional bodyguard, the kind who'd trained with actual military units. Victor saw them emerge onto the roof and smiled like he'd been expecting this exact scenario. "Roman, I was hoping you'd make it. Killing you from a distance seemed unsatisfying." He checked his watch, a gesture so casual it was almost obscene. "My ride arrives in 90 seconds. That's how long you have to try to stop me." "I don't need 90 seconds to kill you." "No? Then why haven't you shot me already?" Victor's smile widened. "Because the moment you do, my associate here will kill the girl, and you've already lost too much tonight to lose her too." The bodyguard's gun shifted, tracking toward Lena. Roman's weapon stayed on Victor. Stalemate. Lena's mind raced through options. The bodyguard was maybe 12 feet away. His stance professional, but not perfect. He was favoring his left leg slightly, an old injury that had never healed quite right. She could see it in the way his weight distributed, the microscopic compensation in his hip alignment. She'd spent years learning to identify exactly these kinds of weaknesses in patients who didn't even know they had them. "Victor, I have a question," Lena said, keeping her voice steady. "When Brandon told you about me, what exactly did you want me for?" Victor looked momentarily thrown by the question. Medical knowledge. Field surgery. The usual. "But I'm a physical therapist, not a surgeon. I can't remove bullets or repair arteries. I can barely stitch a deep cut. Lena took a step forward, saw the bodyguard tense. So either you didn't do your research or you wanted me for something else entirely. Smart girl. You're right, of course. I didn't want you for your medical skills. Victor's expression shifted into something uglier. I wanted you because taking you from Brandon for $30,000 would establish a price point. Other men with debts would see that selling their girlfriends, wives, daughters was an option. Creating that market, controlling it, that's worth far more than one physical therapist. The casual evil of it made Lena's stomach turn. So I was never about medical knowledge. I was about creating a trafficking pipeline. Such an ugly word. I prefer alternative debt resolution. Victor checked his watch again. 60 seconds. This has been fascinating, but my helicopter's almost here. Lena looked at Roman, saw the fury in his eyes, the calculations running behind them. He couldn't shoot Victor without the bodyguard shooting her. Couldn't shoot the bodyguard without Victor escaping. The math didn't work, unless Lena changed the equation. Roman, do you trust me? What? His eyes flicked to her briefly. This isn't the time. Chit. Do you trust me? Yes or no? Yes. Then when I move, you shoot Victor. Don't hesitate. Don't think about me. Just shoot him. Lena took a breath, her hands steady despite everything. I need air. The distress code. Elena's voice came through instantly. Extraction team moving in. 30 seconds. But Lena wasn't waiting 30 seconds. She'd spent the last week learning how to fight, how to fall, how to turn her body into a weapon. She'd spent years before that learning anatomy, biomechanics, exactly how the human body moved and failed and compensated for weakness. The bodyguard was favoring his left leg, which meant his right leg bore less weight, which meant if something hit his right leg with enough force, his balance would fail and his body would compensate by shifting left, away from Lena, giving Roman a clear shot at Victor. Lena dove forward and low, her hand shooting out to grab a piece of debris from the roof. She threw it at the bodyguard's right knee with every ounce of strength she had. The impact wasn't hard enough to break anything, but it didn't need to be. The bodyguard's instinct kicked in, his injured leg buckling, his body shifting left exactly as Lena had predicted. His gun swung away from her for just a fraction of a second. Roman didn't waste it. 2 shots, center mass, and Victor Soren went down. The bodyguard tried to recover, tried to bring his weapon back around, but Marco was already there, emerging from the stairwell with his gun trained. Don't. It's over. The wounded man by the air conditioning unit had his hands up, no fight left in him. The helicopter circled once, its pilot smart enough to realize the pickup wasn't happening, and veered off into the night. Victor lay on the roof, blood spreading beneath him, still somehow smiling. You think this changes anything? I've got people in place, operations running, territory secured. Kill me and someone else takes over. The machine keeps running, Roman. You can't stop it. Don't need to stop it. Just need to break it badly enough that it takes years to rebuild. Roman stood over him, his expression empty of mercy. You wanted to create a market trafficking women? Congratulations. You just became the cautionary tale about what happens when you try. Victor's smile faded as he realized he was actually dying. You're no better than me. You think you're noble, protecting people. But you're still a criminal, still a killer. What's the difference between us? Roman looked at Lena, and something in his expression softened. The difference is, I know exactly what I am. I don't dress up evil in market language and call it business. I own my choices and their consequences. You never did. Victor died without dignity, choking on his own blood, his empire crumbling around him. Lena watched it happen and felt nothing but cold satisfaction. This was the man who'd wanted to turn her into a commodity, who'd planned to create a trafficking network using women like currency. His death didn't balance the scales, but it was a start. The extraction team arrived moments later, flooding the roof with DeLuca people who secured the area with military precision. Elena appeared, very much alive and furious, her tablet already compiling evidence from Victor's operations. Lucien had been planning this for at least 18 months, she said without preamble, showing Roman files that made his jaw tighten. He'd been skimming from operations, building his own network, positioning people to flip the moment you were dead. Victor was supposed to kill you tonight. Then Lucien would have killed Victor and consolidated everything under his control. How did we miss it? Roman's voice was rough. Because he was good at his job and we trusted him. That's the risk with trust. Sometimes people betray it. Elena glanced at Lena. Though apparently Lena suspected him from the start, she mentioned something about his expression when he delivered the intelligence about the shipment schedule. I noticed he looked calculating, Lena said quietly, but I thought I was being paranoid. Paranoia keeps you alive in this world. Elena started packing up her equipment. We've got a lot of cleanup to do. Victor's operations are in chaos, his people are scattered, and we've got maybe 48 hours to absorb what's useful and burn the rest before other organizations move in. The next hours blurred together. Lena gave statements to people whose names she didn't catch, sat in rooms while Roman coordinated the systematic dismantling of Victor's empire. She watched him work, saw the brutal efficiency with which he operated, and understood exactly what she'd gotten herself into. This was her life now. This world of violence and strategy, of careful brutality and calculated risks. She'd stopped being normal Lena Cross the moment she ran into traffic to escape Brandon. The question was whether she could live with who she'd become instead. It was nearly dawn when they finally made it back to the mansion. Lena's ribs were screaming, her entire body felt like one giant bruise, and she was so exhausted she could barely stand. Maria met them at the door with the kind of professional calm that suggested she'd seen people return blood-stained and victorious before. Dr. Chen is in the library. He'll want to check everyone for injuries. Maria's eyes softened when she saw Lena. There's food in the kitchen, hot water for baths, and clean clothes in your rooms. You all did well tonight. Lena made it to her room, stripped off the clothes that smelled like gunpowder and fear, and stood under water hot enough to scald. She watched the last week wash down the drain and tried to process who she was now. Not a victim, not prey. Something harder, sharper, forged in fire and choice. When she emerged, Roman was sitting on her bed, cleaned up but still wearing the exhaustion of the night like a second skin. He looked at her for a long moment, and Lena saw everything unspoken passing between them. You could have died tonight, multiple times. His voice was rough. That thing with the fire escape, with the bodyguard, those were insane risks. So was trusting you when you pulled me out of that car wreck. So was agreeing to help steal Victor's money. So was walking into that factory knowing it was probably a trap. Lena sat next to him, their shoulders touching. I'm done playing it safe, Roman. Safe got me sold for $30,000. And now? Now I'm someone who brings down fire escapes and predicts body mechanics and doesn't apologize for surviving. Lena leaned into him, felt his arm come around her. Is that someone you can work with? Work with? Lena, that's someone I can't imagine working without. Roman pulled her closer, careful of her ribs. Elena's already running numbers on Victor's former operations. There's a lot of territory that's about to be unclaimed, businesses that need new management, people who need protection from the chaos. We could absorb half of it, use it to go legitimate, turn blood money into something cleaner. We? You think I'm letting you walk away after you saved my life 3 times in one night? You're stuck with me now. Roman's smile was tired but genuine. Unless you want out, the offer stands. You can walk away, relocate anywhere, start over with enough money to never worry again. I'd make sure you were safe, that Victor's remaining people couldn't find you. You could go back to being normal. Lena thought about it. Really thought about it. She could leave, start fresh, become someone new in a city far from this violence and chaos. Go back to physical therapy, find a quiet life, pretend the last week had never happened. But the woman who would have chosen that life had died in a car crash on Park Avenue. The woman who existed now had thrown concrete at fire escapes and predicted bodyguard biomechanics and watched a crime lord bleed out without flinching. I don't want normal. I want this, whatever this becomes. Lena turned to face him directly. But I have conditions. Of course you do. We go legitimate, not all at once, but systematically. Use Victor's territory to build something that actually helps people instead of exploiting them. Community centers, clinics, housing projects, things that make the neighborhoods we control actually better. Lena's voice was steady. I'm not going to be part of an organization that creates trafficking markets or destroys lives for profit. If we're doing this, we're doing it with something resembling honor. Roman studied her for a long moment. You realize that makes us more vulnerable? That legitimate businesses have regulations and oversight and all the complications that criminal enterprises avoid? Good. Complications mean accountability. I can live with that. My family has run criminal operations for 3 generations. Then maybe it's time for the 4th generation to be different. Lena held his gaze. I'm not asking you to become a saint, Roman. I'm asking you to become someone who builds instead of just taking, someone your sister Elena would have been proud of. The mention of his sister made something shift in Roman's expression. He was quiet for a long time, and Lena wondered if she'd pushed too far, demanded too much. 6 months, he said finally. Give me 6 months to stabilize what we took from Victor, to secure the transitions, to make sure we're not vulnerable while we shift operations. Then we start the legitimization process. Slowly, carefully, but actually doing it. I can work with 6 months, and you stay, officially. Not as someone I'm protecting, but as my actual partner. Equal say in decisions, equal access to operations, equal everything. Roman's hand found hers. I don't do things halfway, Lena. If you're in, you're all the way in. Then I'm all the way in. They sealed it with a kiss that felt like a promise and a threat and a beginning all at once. Lena had walked into Roman's world broken and terrified, had been forged by violence and choice into something she barely recognized. But that unrecognizable person felt more real than anyone she'd been before. The next 6 months were a blur of transformation. They absorbed Victor's territory systematically, offering his former employees choices: work for the DeLucas under new rules or find employment elsewhere. The ones who chose violence over adaptation were removed, professionally and permanently. The ones who wanted something different became part of something that started looking less like a crime syndicate and more like an actual business empire. Lena threw herself into the work with the same intensity she'd brought to her physical therapy degree. She learned finance from Elena, strategy from Roman, how to read people from Maria. She worked alongside Dr. Chen to establish clinics in neighborhoods that had never had adequate health care, fought with city bureaucrats to get permits for housing projects, turned blood-stained warehouses into community centers that actually served communities. It wasn't clean. It wasn't simple. There were setbacks and complications and moments when Lena wondered if she was just putting a prettier face on the same ugly machinery. But slowly, measurably, things changed. The territories the DeLucas controlled became safer. Not perfect, but better. Businesses thrived instead of being bled dry. People stopped disappearing. The violence that had defined these neighborhoods for generations started to recede, replaced by something that looked almost like hope. Roman watched Lena work with an expression that shifted from surprise to respect to something deeper. She caught him staring sometimes when she was elbow-deep in blueprints for a youth center or arguing with contractors about building codes, and the look on his face made her chest tight with feelings she wasn't quite ready to name. They didn't talk about the future beyond the immediate next steps, didn't discuss what came after the 6-month deadline, after the transition to legitimate operations was complete. It felt safer to focus on the work, on the tangible changes they could measure and control. But the future came for them anyway, the way futures always do. Lena discovered she was pregnant 3 weeks before the 6-month deadline. She stared at the positive test in the mansion's bathroom, her hands shaking, her mind racing through implications. A child, Roman's child, born into a world that was transitioning from criminal empire to something cleaner but still carried all the weight of its history. She told him that night in his study, where they'd had so many late conversations about strategy and morality and the impossible calculus of trying to build something good from violent foundations. I'm pregnant. Roman looked up from the contract he'd been reviewing, his expression going through a complicated journey of shock and something else before settling on careful neutrality. Are you sure? 3 tests, all positive. I'm probably about 8 weeks along. Lena sat across from him, her hands clasped to keep them steady. I know this complicates everything. The timing is terrible. The situation is impossible. And I completely understand if I what? Run? Pretend it's not mine? Suggest you handle it privately? Roman's voice was sharp. What exactly do you think I am, Lena? I think you're someone who didn't plan on having a family while trying to transform a criminal organization into legitimate businesses. No, I didn't plan on it. But I also didn't plan on you crashing into my car or taking down fire escapes with 60% odds or becoming the most important person in my life. Roman moved around the desk, pulled her to her feet. This isn't a complication. This is just what happens when people build something real instead of just strategic. Basi patenci okam sesin. You want this? Lena heard the vulnerability in her own voice. Hated it, couldn't hide it. I want you. I want whatever future we're building. If that future includes a child, then that's what we figure out together. Roman's hands framed her face. But you need to decide what you want, Lena. Not what I want, not what's strategic or convenient. What do you actually want? Lena thought about the woman she'd been before the crash. That woman had wanted normal, safe, predictable. That woman would have been terrified of bringing a child into this world of violence and transformation. But the woman she'd become wanted something different. Wanted to prove that people could change, that empires built on blood could transform into something better, that children born into complicated legacies could become something their grandparents never imagined. I want this. The child, the life we're building, all of it, even though it's terrifying and complicated and probably insane. Then that's what we do. They told Elena first because she'd become Lena's closest ally in the transformation work. She cried, actual tears, and hugged Lena hard enough to hurt. Roman's father would have lost his mind with joy, Elena said, wiping her eyes. He always wanted grandchildren, wanted the family to continue. This would have meant everything to him. Even though we're dismantling everything he built? Especially because of that. He was a complicated man, but he loved this city, loved the people in it. If he could see what you're turning his empire into, he'd be proud. Elena smiled. My cousin Elena would have loved you too. She always wanted Roman to find someone who challenged him, who didn't just follow orders. You're exactly what this family needed. The news spread through the organization like wildfire. Maria started knitting immediately, producing tiny sweaters and blankets at an alarming rate. Dmitri began installing additional security throughout the mansion, muttering in Russian about protecting future generations. Even Marco, usually stoic to the point of being stone-faced, cracked a smile and offered congratulations. Lena worked through her first trimester while simultaneously overseeing the completion of their first fully legitimate business acquisition, a medical supply company that they could use to funnel resources to the clinics she'd established. Morning sickness made negotiations interesting, but she learned to keep crackers in her briefcase and push through. Roman became impossibly protective, which Lena found both endearing and infuriating. He wanted her to stop working, to rest, to let other people handle the stress of transformation. She told him where he could put those suggestions, and they had their first real fight in the library where she'd first started learning about his world. You're carrying my child, Lena. Our child. That means being careful, not throwing yourself into 14-hour days negotiating with people who'd stab you for looking at them wrong. These people work for you. They're not going to stab a pregnant woman. You don't know that. This world is still dangerous, still unpredictable. I can't lose you. Roman's voice cracked slightly. I can't lose another person I love to violence that could have been prevented. The word love hung between them, unplanned and raw. They'd never said it before, had danced around it for months while focusing on partnership and strategy and building something together. Hearing it now, in the middle of a fight about her working schedule, felt both perfectly wrong and perfectly right. You love me. Lena said it like a statement, not a question. Of course I love you. How could I not? You're brilliant and fierce, and you saved my life, and you're trying to turn my family's blood-soaked empire into something that actually helps people. I've loved you since you threw concrete at a fire escape with 60% odds. Roman looked exhausted. So, yes, I'm protective. Yes, I want you safe. Yes, I'm terrified every second that something will happen to you or the baby, and I won't be able to stop it. Lena's anger drained away, replaced by something softer. I love you too, and I'm scared too, but I can't stop working, Roman. This transformation, this change we're making, it's not just about business. It's about proving that people like us can become something better. The children born into this world can inherit something worth having instead of just violence and money. They compromised. Lena cut her hours to 10 a day instead of 14, agreed to security escorts for all meetings, and promised to actually rest when her body demanded it. Roman stopped hovering quite so intensely and channeled his protective instincts into securing their future, both financial and literal. The 6-month deadline came and went. The transformation wasn't complete. Legitimizing generations of criminal enterprise took years, not months, but they'd made measurable progress. 60% of their operations were now legal, or in the process of becoming legal. The neighborhoods they controlled had seen crime rates drop by 40%. 3 new community centers were operational. 5 clinics were providing healthcare to people who'd never had access before, and the housing projects they'd funded were actually livable. On the day that marked exactly 1 year since Lena had crashed into Roman's car, they got married in the mansion's garden. Small ceremony, just family and the people who'd become family. Maria cried through the entire thing. Elena made a speech about transformation and second chances that had half the guests in tears. Dmitri gave them a set of kitchen knives as a wedding present, which was either thoughtful or threatening, depending on interpretation. Lena wore a dress that accommodated her growing belly, now visibly pregnant at 5 months. Roman stood next to her in a suit that probably cost more than her old apartment, and when they exchanged vows, Lena thought about the terrified woman who'd run into traffic and the crime boss who'd pulled her from a wreckage. Neither of those people existed anymore. They'd been transformed by choice and consequence into something neither of them had planned, but both of them had fought for. "I promise to build something worth inheriting," Roman said, his voice steady. "To be the kind of man our children can be proud of, even knowing where we came from." "I promise to never stop pushing us to be better," Lena responded. "To challenge every decision, question every choice, and make sure we never forget that power comes with responsibility." They sealed it with a kiss that felt like a promise kept and a future claimed. The twins, because of course it was twins, because nothing in Lena's life could be simple, were born on a freezing January night 3 months later. Marcus and Elena, named for Roman's father and his lost sister. They came early, as twins often did, requiring a terrifying dash to the hospital and 12 hours of labor that left Lena exhausted and exhilarated in equal measure. Roman cried when he held them, actual tears streaming down his face as he looked at his children and seemed to see every possibility and responsibility they represented. "They're going to grow up in a different world than we did," he said quietly, adjusting Marcus in his arms while Elena slept against Lena's chest. "Better, cleaner, full of choices instead of just obligations." "They're also going to know exactly where they came from," Lena said firmly. "The good and the bad, the violence and the transformation. They deserve to know the truth about their family." Agreed. Roman looked at her, and the love in his expression was almost unbearable. "Thank you for crashing into my life, for refusing to be a victim, for building this with me. Thank you for pulling me out of the wreckage, for teaching me I could be strong, for becoming someone worth building with." The twins grew up in a world that straddled 2 realities: the weight of their family's history and the possibility of its future. The mansion that had once been a fortress became a home, filled with the chaos of children and the constant work of maintaining an empire in transformation. Lena threw herself into the continued legitimization with the same intensity she'd brought to everything else. By the time the twins were 3, 80% of DeLuca operations were legal. The remaining 20% were being systematically converted or shut down, a process complicated by the realities of untangling generations of criminal infrastructure. But they did it, slowly, imperfectly, but actually doing it. The neighborhoods that had once feared the DeLuca name started to see it differently, not as predators, but as people who'd chosen to invest in community instead of exploitation. The clinics Lena had established treated thousands of patients. The community centers Roman funded became safe spaces for kids who'd never had them. The housing projects they'd built provided stable homes for families who'd been trapped in cycles of poverty. It wasn't perfect. There were still complications, still moments when the old violence threatened to resurface, still people who couldn't believe the DeLucas had actually changed. But the evidence was harder to deny with each passing year. On Marcus and Elena's 5th birthday, Lena stood in the garden where she'd married Roman and watched their children play with other kids from the neighborhood. A mix of backgrounds and circumstances that would have been impossible in the old territorial days. Maria's grandchildren were there, alongside children whose parents worked in the legitimate businesses they'd acquired, alongside kids from the community centers who'd been invited because every child deserved birthday cake and celebration. Roman found her watching, slipped an arm around her waist. "What are you thinking?" "That I'm glad I ran that red light." Lena leaned into him. "That crashing into your car was the best terrible decision I ever made. Even knowing everything it would cost, everything you'd have to become. Especially knowing that. The woman I was before would have been terrified of this life, but she also would have stayed with Brandon, would have let fear control her choices, would have survived instead of actually living." Lena turned to face him. "I don't miss her. I don't want to be her again." "Good, because I'm quite fond of who you became instead." They watched their children play, watched the future they'd built from wreckage and choice, and the impossible belief that people could change if they wanted it badly enough. The DeLuca Empire had been transformed from criminal enterprise into something that actually improved the world, one clinic and community center and conscious choice at a time. It wasn't a fairy tale. There were still complications, still struggles, still moments when the weight of their history threatened to drag them backward. But they'd proven something important, that people weren't defined by where they started, but by what they chose to become. That empires built on violence could be transformed into forces for good. That love could survive and even thrive in the spaces between who you were and who you decided to be. Lena Cross had run into traffic to escape a man who saw her as property, had crashed into a crime boss's car, and had somehow turned that disaster into a life worth living. She'd become a weapon when the world tried to make her a victim, had challenged a criminal empire to become something better, and had built a family from the ruins of everything she'd thought her life would be. She wouldn't change a single moment of it. The twins called for their parents, wanting them to join the games, and Lena and Roman went together, hand in hand, into the future they'd fought for. A future built on transformation and choice, on the radical belief that people deserved better than what they'd been given, and on the understanding that sometimes the worst moments of your life were actually the beginning of something impossibly good. Behind them, the mansion stood solid and permanent, a fortress that had become a home. Around them, the city continued its endless rhythm, full of people making choices and facing consequences and trying to build something better from whatever materials they had. And ahead of them, Marcus and Elena laughed and played, innocent of the violence that had preceded their birth, but growing up in a world shaped by their parents' determination to be different, to be better, to prove that transformation was always possible if you were brave enough to choose it. Lena had chosen it. Every day, she kept choosing it. And in those choices, she'd found something more valuable than safety or normalcy or any of the things she'd thought she wanted. She'd found herself.